No, that's all right. Go ahead, Gary.
Councilor Freely.
I'm assuming that you'll be able to create a clear pathway then through Nancy here to assist Betsy in dovetailing with whatever services she'll be able to provide. And, you know, there won't be confidentiality necessarily that will hamper her from being able to give that personalized assistance to those.
That would be the goal between, city officials, CFS and CRD and the Small Business Development Center, that we would want to make sure that your business owners are well aware of and well served for their business needs.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Councilor Freely. Councilor Baraboo.
I just had one quick comment. I really appreciate that you're putting an individual, Nancy, in-house to work with all the business owners for the paperwork, because sometimes that paperwork is not understandable by some individuals, so I appreciate it. And with Betsy's help along with that, I think that's a great aspect for this program. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Welcome aboard. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the request from ISD 706 to purchase the property located in Progress Park, which we've commonly referred to as Site B. There is a map in your packet. Site B does include the vacant lots that are on White Cedar Drive, and basically goes up 240 is right around the Spectrum building.
Okay, thank you.
We do have Dr. Schmidt in the house if you can.
I see we have Murray Anderson, the president of the school board, and the distinguished Dr. Noel Schmidt, the superintendent of the Virginia schools. Welcome to the Virginia City Council meeting.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. I brought our school board president with us, Murray Anderson, and we are here to ask for a price on Site B. Site B, as we are calling Site B, I believe you have maps, it's approximately 90 acres or so. That is where we would like to build some ball fields and some other buildings for the school district, especially the new combined school district, Evelyn Gilbert, Virginia. The City of Evelyn is working with us on purchasing what we call Site A, which is located in Evelyn. Last night, Jeff Carey said that they are looking at a $40,000 price tag on Site A, which is approximately 40 acres. So that's what that deal is looking like for those 40 acres on Site A. And so we're here We've talked about this site for a long, long time. We've had people stomping around that site. They looking down every gully, every ravine, every wetland. We know that site inside and out because we have to find out what is there, what's buildable, and it's a tough site. Many of the acres are not buildable. There are some areas we can use. We will to probably get some wetland credits though. So we're here asking for, we've talked about it for a long time, and we really need to acquire the property so that we can move forward. And that's why I'm here, asking for, what do you want?
Thank you. Before we move to the rest of the councilors, I'd just like to make a couple of comments. This is my personal perspective. It has always been my personal perspective. I try to look at the long-term approach and the benefits that we have to our community, whether it's arts and entertainment, whether it's public works, whether it's professional service that we have to provide what the city needs to thrive and grow and be a successful and vibrant community that's a safe place for people to live and work. Education is one of the largest pieces of this puzzle, and I've always been a proponent of conveying property to certain needs, whether it's for economic development, albeit it's a tax revenue after you build it, but it's the long-term benefit for our community, for our children and grandchildren moving forward. So I've always been a proponent of conveyance. Now, the other councilors will probably talk about what needs to be done. I know that Evelyn is about 40 acres. The agreement is about $1,000 an acre. I think that we have acreage that could be up to 155 acres or whatever the case may be. So I think we have to get off the ball here. We have to give you a price. We've been awaiting an appraisal from a company called Bigelow that's taken a long time to do this. And I know the previous appraisal that came in from a commercial appraiser down in the metro area was at $900,000. But we've had this property for 25, 30 years or longer. We collaborated with Evelyn and the IRRB in Virginia, putting in $900,000 each to get this Progress Park thing going, mostly for the two buildings to try to bring some high-tech industry into the community, which we weren't successful at doing. We shrunk the agreement between Progress Park, between Evelyn, Virginia, and the IRRB. We now are responsible under the VEDA, the Virginia Economic Development Authority, to manage these two parcels of property, 1402 building and the 1404 building, both located in Evelyn, but part of the Progress Park thing. So as you move forward and try to develop this parcel, it's been a huge challenge. I've been to many of your meetings, and the challenge is that you can't find flat land on which to build. You know, the argument was that you want, or the agreement was, or the proposal was that Site B might be buildable. We find that the wetlands are so significant that, you know, to mitigate them and to try to build that on parcels of flatland doesn't accommodate the acreage that you need in order to build this facility, whether it's the high school facility and the elementary school, and of course the remodeling of the one in Virginia. So from my perspective, I think we have to find a common ground today in which to accomplish that goal and objective, or to have an answer to you by the end of the day. That's my perspective. And so I'm on record, have been from the very beginning, and I don't want to change that, by conveying property for the future of our children is important. Now, I understand the economic arguments that some of the people from the general public are going to make. They're valid, that maybe we should get some money for this project. We did spend $90,000, about $92,000, something to that effect, for buying the Mulliver property in anticipation for some economic development, whether it be that private or the public school portion of it. To recover that parcel would be something to consider as well. But I think we have to come to some kind of agreement. We all understand where we're at. We all understand where we have to be. And we know you're in a time crunch. You have to make this determination. And we're kind of the last, I'm not going to say we're a monkey wrench in the gearbox, but we're the last entity that needs to, the piece of the puzzle that you need to move forward. Otherwise, you have to seek some alternative opportunities. So that being said, you know, I'm all about conveyance, but we'll see what the other councilors have to say. So let's start from right to left. We'll start with Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, I have been very supportive of the school and the building of the property, but I also have a responsibility to the citizens of Virginia to make sure we are looking at this from multiple angles. This is one of the things I've actually lost sleep over, is this piece of property, and do we charge you, do we not charge you, what do we charge you? Britt, did we get a appraisal back?
I have a verbal dollar amount that he told me. He's not available to, was not able to get it to us in time for this meeting, but he said verbally it was $1 million.
Okay,
And the mayor is correct. The previous appraisal we had done approximately 5 years ago was 950,000, so
that
very
sounds about
similar.
right. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So don't worry, I'm not gonna ask you for $1 million. So I've really been wrestling with this because I now have a daughter in the Virginia School District in kindergarten, and by the time she gets to high school, the academies will be working. And I know one of the concerns is that the more money we charge you, the less money you get to use on programming and that kind of stuff. Get that. So after a lot of thought and honestly, a couple of nights of dreams and some really bizarre stuff, this is my proposal. You had sent an email throwing out the number $50,000. I like that number. I think it's very valid, but I think what we need to do is we take that $50,000 and we divide it in half. $25,000 of that goes to the children's portion of the library to be able to make our children's library the place where your kids go after school, and they will still go after school once the new elementary is built. And the other elementary, they'll be going to the Virginia Public Library after school for childcare. Our library staff are amazing at working with and keeping kids safe after school. So that was my thought, was that we really put that money back into our children, because that's the big concern, that we're going to waste this money and use it on. So we're gonna fix that, and we're gonna make that better. And the other half goes to Parks and Rec to work on playgrounds and other things directly relative to the children, particularly Pine Mill Court, where the equipment there is in need of upgrade. And to me, that way, we're not taking money away from kids, which seems to be a little catchphrase that goes around a lot, and it's really frustrating because that makes us sound like a bunch of ogres, and we're not. We're just looking out. So if we do $50,000 and the city designates half and half, then we're not taking money away from kids. We're actually building our city infrastructure for long-term investment in our children. You get your site, you can move forward. And then I would even say that if we need to do, how long does there need to be between readings for selling property?
10 days.
10 days.
10 days. So I would be up for setting, the meeting, is a week away at 7, if we could, and this is just thinking out loud, holding a special city council meeting in our 3-day time frame so we can start that 10 days quicker, so we can get you out and moving faster. So that's where I'm at. I think that that's fair. The difference between 950 and $1 million is $50,000. It's an investment. You're going to use the land. It's going to be available for general public use. I would anticipate and hope that there's going to be some trails, and I think we've talked about that before, trails and that kind of stuff. So that's where I'm at on that, and I'm very willing to make a motion once everybody else has had an opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your comments, Councilor Johnson. I'm on the frequency where if a fee is paid, whatever that money is, whether it's $50,000 or if there's a fee that's attached to that, purchase this land, that we as a city council can designate anywhere we want where that $50,000 to go. And I think this suggestions you made that we reinvest in the community for our community, for our children is a noble motion to move forward with. So that being said, we're going to move to Councilor Barnzelli.
Thank you, Mayor. Morning, Mr. Noel. Is that lake, will you have to go through the DNR to deal with that water?
Mud Lake in the back?
It's the north side of it?
No, because right now our current plan would be to leave it as is and not build around that lake. We would use it honestly for an environmental area, for science. Kids to go out there and do water experiments and nature experience. So right at where the water is, you can see where the body of water is. And then what you can't see is it's swamp, for extending out from the water that you can't build on, even if we wanted to. And so we're looking at that area. It would be great for our science, for future environmental areas, because you have the trees, you have the water, you have, everything is there. And very, very few schools have that opportunity. So that's how we would look at that.
Put some northerns or some walleyes and let them fishing.
If there are any northerns or walleyes in there, I'm sure we have some kids who would love to try and find them.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I used to walk my dog for years in the summertime. There's an old hunting shack that we used when we were little kids that is still back there by Mud Lake along that area. I'm sure if you haven't walked it, you'll find it there, so thank you. Who's next? Counselor Bearable?
Yeah, Steve, I appreciate your thoughts on this particular project. I've kind of been in the same boat as the mayor on this, but I could go along with a $50,000 price tag for those purposes that we would designate. There's a couple reasons why, and I sat down last night after I got done with the meeting at the Elks, and I wrote down some interesting things. And, well, you're going to have to answer, or Murray, a couple of these things. You've been seeking private partnerships, and you've already had a big meeting with the mining companies, correct? And they're willing to donate equipment, I understand, to things that will pertain to mining and other industries in the future. They won't have programs on site because of liabilities, but they will have tours and stuff for students and getting interest more in people that they need specialty to do, and it sounds like they'll contribute some dollars toward these new programs. Is that correct?
We talked to them. We did not talk to them about specifics.
Okay.
We just wanted to acquaint them with the idea of the academies, and then what we're trying to do, because we're looking at this as a slow dance that will happen over the next number of years. So yes, it would be great to have them, because there are probably some pieces of equipment that our kids could use, but they're expensive. And so, yes, we would be looking for donations from area businesses. We're certainly not going to turn them away.
I understand you just had a recent commitment from Essentia Health to help fund, I believe, either instructor, the programs, not to put a clinic in or anything, but to do some of that. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Essentia has said that they're willing to help us on with some entry-level healthcare positions, that they're willing to help fund the instructors for that, teachers for that, so which is huge, because healthcare is a massive job growth area on the range here. So yes, we've already had Essentia say that they're stepping up and interested in helping.
And there's one other piece of this puzzle that not many have thought about, and that is these two pieces of land, Parcel A and Parcel B, are in a joint powers commitment. So the Joint Powers Board has to approve the purchase price on both of these sites. And if I'm wrong, tell me, but I think I'm correct on that. That is
For
true?
the 1402 property and the 1404 property, yes, that's my understanding.
But what about the properties of the land? Because do they have to approve the Site B and Site A?
Not my understanding.
Okay, then I was
You are
told
the
wrong.
deciding body on
Okay,
what we
okay.
are calling this.
That makes it a lot easier then for this project. But I'm in agreement, I don't have an angst with the 50,000 if it's designated back to projects for the city. So I'm supportive of that. I'm more on the mayor's side. I'd give it to you as $0, but I like what Steve has proposed. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Bearable. Counselor Freely?
You can only imagine what kind of feedback we're going to hear when the city has $1 million worth of property and they're willing to give it to the school district for $50,000. Given the fact that we've also made investments in property in Midway to the tune of $200,000 for a abandoned hotel and $90,000 for Rocky Top on the top of the hill. But I agree, Steve's got a good idea with regard to how that money could be utilized for the sake of the kids in this community. But I struggle with, like, the backlash that we're going to hear, and I think justifiably so to some degree. One question that I would have is, like, you made, and congratulations, and I commend you both for the point that you're at in this project, and we certainly are not going to be pulling the reins back whatsoever in any regard, and I hope you don't think that we have been to this point either. When you made that proposal and it came to whatever, $180-some million project, all totaled, so to speak, somewhere in your line budgeting, you had to have some approximate number you felt was necessary for land acquisition, I'm assuming. And what was that, and how much have you spent of that?
The total budget for land acquisition, now this includes surveying, everything, $3 million for all sites.
And so far, you've tapped that, or?
So far, we're butting up close to it. So we do have a budget for it, yes, and line budget, is just because we had to acquire the Spectrum Health properties. We literally had to. That was 2.1 million right there.
I think initial conversations in the city were that there was going to be some kind of a land swap or exchange that was going to be kind of cost-free to some degree. So, that kind of moved it forward with that kind of anticipation and notion. So now all of a sudden being stuck with potential costs that you hadn't anticipated, I can understand why you need to know so we can move forward. So, so it was about $1,000 per acre through the joint powers that Evelyn offered for the parcel that they provided?
City of
or-
Evelyn, yes, is what they're going to sell according to Jeff Carey, and this is last night at the Joint Powers Board meeting, he said this. So it'd be a total of $40,000 for 40 acres on what we are knowing as Site A, which is only a couple of 100 yards away from where the high school will be built.
I guess I would, in my mind, I think like to kind of balance things between the two communities, to do the same from our standpoint for whatever the acreage is there, to afford that same price for that property, I think would be fair and maybe give us even more bigger bang for our buck for how we could utilize those dollars without really necessarily pulling the rug out from where you were with your budgeted land acquisition costs that you anticipated. So that's kind of where I am at, is like they already provided that offer to you. We could balance that similarly and get a reasonable amount, not that 50,000 isn't reasonable, but we could at least justify to the public more so that Evelyn did this on behalf of the school district combination. We're doing the same thing on behalf of them, and everything's balanced is how I look at it. And it would just give us a little bit more for what Steve's suggesting in terms of being able to reinvest those dollars into the youth in the community. So that's kind of what I would suggest, and I'm not exactly sure what that dollar amount would come to because I don't know what those.
There's a-
155?
No, that's not that much, Larry.
Britt?
Oh, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, because I had conversation, I actually went over and pounded on Mr. Bigelow's door over in Hibbing and got his son, and his son got in touch with him, and Mr. Bigelow has contacted myself on this appraisal, and I've kept Britt appraised of this. They have on record 115 acres, it's not 90, it's 115 acres from for Site B, it's 115 acres.
Correct.
But not all of that is usable.
No,
either.
not
So
all of that is usable.
Make a deal there for what's more.
Yeah, he eliminated from the price, and as appraisal, he said the wetlands there, he did not include that as a value when he did that appraisal. He's just got a couple tweaks, and unfortunately, he had to chase an ambulance to Duluth on Sunday. He was going to have the information here today, but his wife ended up with some serious medical things, so he had to chase an ambulance to Duluth. But the number he gave us is accurate. He said that won't change. The wetlands would not be included as part of an additional cost. But Gary is correct. The wetlands are worthless for development because it's too costly to develop. So if you're looking at $1,000 an acre, it'd be $115,000 then.
Britt?
That would be the other.
Britt, what information do you have?
I did find out this morning also that Evelyn did offer their acreage, their 40 acres for $1,000 an acre. So I kind of follow what Gary is saying, Councilor Friedli was saying, that maybe we follow suit with Evelyn did at $1,000 an acre,
And which comes to how much?
$115,000.
$115,000, thank you.
And the other justification I want to point out was that we had also mentioned the Mulliver property the city had purchased was 90-some thousand dollars. Total with our legal fees was 102. So in my mind, the 115,000, if we charged the 1,000 per acre, would balance out what we paid for the Mulliver property.
which is developable property moving
Correct.
forward. Thank you, Britt, very much. Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. So I know Site B has a lot of challenges in terms of the wetlands, and of that 115, I guess I couldn't hear specifically, but of that 115,000, how many of those acres are considered wetlands? Or is there additional above and beyond the 115?
About half, either wetlands or the ravines are so steep that
Okay, so I'm comfortable with the 50,000. I think that there are a lot of challenges with Site B. And just after, and for some clarification, Councilor Bearaboo, when we had voted to unravel those two properties, the only two properties that remained were in the building, in that joint powers. Otherwise, the land went back. Virginia got our land back, and Evelyn got their land back. And I'm assuming that's Site A? Is that correct? Okay. So going forward, I really like Councilor Johnson's idea, and I would feel comfortable moving forward at 50,000. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Just a quick comment from my perspective. Again, you know, it's an investment in our community. We probably will get some pushback regardless of what we end up with an agreement between the school districts and the city of Virginia. You know, the $115,000 to balance out the $1,000 an acre that Evelyn negotiated with the school district, and what we could potentially recover, $115,000 to recover the costs associated with the Mulliver property. I don't think we bought the Mulliver property for the purpose of selling it to the school. It was additional property that the school, it was a possibility that the school could utilize that at some future time, or it could be for some other economic development, whether it be homes or residential properties. The city is landlocked. There was a lot of pushback about purchasing that Mulliver property because they thought that we shouldn't be in the real estate business, but we're not. That property is for future development. We are landlocked. We need that property. In this particular instance, the property is not buildable, and it's commercial, and it's been available for such a long period of time. Evelyn negotiated for $1,000 an acre. Councilor Freely indicated that we could do a quid pro quo based upon the acreage we have for $115,000. So from my perspective, I'm going to support any proposal or any motion that comes before the council today from $0 to $115,000. So whatever that proposal is, whatever that motion is, I'm going to support it because I think it's a long-term investment for the future of our children. I think we have to look at it from the long term as opposed to the short term. And $1 million for that property is not, it's not buildable. We haven't had any interest in it whatsoever. It was done through VEDA with the potential of mitigating the wetlands in the very beginning. And now it's cost even more money to do that. There was no interest in building it because of all these challenges that we have. Water and sewer and everything is all to be done through this process on White Cedar Drive, which we would be utilized from the school to move forward with their projects. So we have infrastructure investment already, not only through the city of Virginia, but through the IRRB and through as a collaborative in this Progress Park. So Progress Park has served a useful purpose. Unfortunately, it's serving more of a useful purpose now by providing an opportunity for use by the schools moving forward. So that's the comments I make. I'm looking forward, maybe hopefully, for a motion in that regard. So does any other counselor have any questions or comments before I ask that we entertain a motion one way or the other, whether it's to approve a certain amount or whether it's to move it back a week? I would urge, from my perspective, that we make a decision today. So thank you. Anyone? Councilor Bearaboo?
Yeah, I agree 100%. We can't delay this because of our time frame with our 10-day window that we have to have for the two readings to transfer property. So this ends up, down the road at least till, let's see, the 19th. Our next committee will be the council meeting after that, which is in the just before Thanksgiving. So that's unless we have a special meeting within 10 days to do this. So I agree, we need to make a decision today. I'm leaning toward Steve's because in the beginning, and I've been through lots of this is my 26th year on the city council, and I've been through lots of these properties, we give them for zero, and we end up with a tax base, and of course, the school, you don't end up with a tax base on that, but the future for development of business and everything else, it's riding on getting this going, so we have many alternatives that these young individuals can be looking for the future for jobs and extended jobs in this area. And it's going to boom one day with this because there are needed jobs. If you drive around the Iron Range right now, some of your vocational jobs are out there. Every place is advertising for those. That's just one portion, but it's the healthcare is. There's going to be some big things happening in healthcare up here, so that's going to be a outstanding venue for new jobs. So I think I would go along with Steve's proposal.
All right, thank you. Counselor Johnson?
So I'll make a motion that we sell the property to, who exactly are we selling it to?
You would be selling to the Joint Powers Board.
Okay, the Joint Powers Board for the amount of $50,000 with the buyer paying the extra fees, because then that takes care of that more, it gets us closer to the 115, the upper end. So I think that's legitimate, having you all pay for all those fees, and then earmarking that $50,000 from the property to go to specifically children-focused programming, half to the children's area and half to Parks and Rec for playground.
Motion by Counselor Johnson, is there support?
I'll support, Mayor, for further discussion.
Support by Counselor Bearable for further discussion. Further discussion, Counselor Bearable.
I was just thinking, Steve, and maybe Britt, you can enlighten me. Can we roll this all into one motion, the sale and everything, and along with a development agreement on this, or do you need to do that separately?
As part of the sale, we would do a development agreement anyway, so it can be one motion.
Could be one motion. Because we need to get started, even though we won't finish this for 10 days. The school needs to get going with Britt on a development agreement on this piece of property, because she's got to do her due. That would include those costs you're talking about, too.
I would amend accordingly.
Okay. Please restate your motion, Counselor Johnson.
Well, I would amend that we, and authorize staff to move forward as appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Is that?
And this.
I'll support that
The support is amended by your support?
Yes.
And your offer of the amendment?
Yes.
Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Barnzelli.
Has that property ever been appraised?
Yeah, we had an appraisal of about 5 years ago at $950,000. We have a verbal agreement from Bigelow that the property value based on commercial status of about $1 million. So we just had this discussion about, whether this is a buildable site and whether this is actually marketable, and the history of this over the years. And so we're at the stage right now, Councilor Barnzeller, which you have a motion on the floor for to sell to the Joint Powers Board the property in Site B for $50,000. Along with the project development agreement moving forward, and all the costs and fees associated with the sale of this property to be borne by the Joint Powers Board. Good, okay. It's moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Motion carries. Anything else, Dr. Schmidt or Mr. Anderson?
Thank you very, very much, and our kids appreciate your decisions.
Mayor?
May I ask, Mayor, one question? Now that you had it sold to the Joint Powers, aren't they going to have to approve it, not just your school board?
Say that again, please.
Now that you had it land transferred on what you said to the Joint Powers Board, aren't you going to have their approval on this? It's not just the board?
The
To
sale-
approve,
Yes,
sale.
they will
Okay.
have to officially.
That's what I was talking about
Yes.
before. Okay. That answered that question. Thank you.
That borns another question by Councilor Johnson.
Is our time frame okay now if we have to formally approve it on next Tuesday and then the second reading 2 weeks after that? Is that,
Yes, because the Joint Powers Board, they met last night. Their next meeting is actually going to be the first Monday in December. So if you approve it on your end, that would be perfect timing then for the Joint Board to approve that in the first Monday in December.
thank you.
It'll be our intent to have the development agreement done at the next meeting, the council meeting next week for first reading. And so we'll have that ready and prepared, so you guys will have plenty of time to review it too before we finalize it on the 26th.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Schmidt. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you.
Number 4, we're
Number 4, we will come to another meeting. This meeting was very long and her topic is pretty intense, so we'll talk about that at another meeting.
very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 5 is the request for amendment of professional services contract with SEH for Midway Drive project in the amount not to exceed $19,700. And we have Matt Reed from SEH.
Good morning, Matt.
Good morning.
Welcome again.
Thank you. So yes, so a couple of weeks ago, this topic came up, as you might recall, and this was in relation to the schedule on the Midway Drive project. So maybe before I get into that, I'll just give a real quick update on where that's at. They are just about done for the year. The only thing they have left is to put up all the signs, which has been a bit of an issue here the last week or so. But I was on the phone with the contractor and their sub yesterday, and supposedly they are coming up today to put the signs in. So I'm gonna cross my fingers that they follow through on that. That's been a very frustrating endeavor. But nonetheless, excuse me, the blacktop is down, as you can tell, and everything's cleaned up. And once those signs are up, and they've got to put bollards around a hydrant. And other than that, they should be wrapped up for the winter.
And one quick question. Next year, to finish off the project, what would they need to do?
They have to do one more layer of blacktop. They have to put the sod in. They weren't able to get the sod. It got wet. They couldn't get in the fields to cut the sod by the time they got ready for it. And so they have to bring sod in. And then beyond that, it's just cleanup work. Those are the major items, the sod and the last lift of blacktop. So then there'll be a punch list, of course, we'll walk through, and there'll be miscellaneous items that they'll have to cover. So
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So I tried to lay out, without getting too wordy in my letter, the time frame on the events that happened, and in my request for an amendment that I had mentioned here a couple weeks ago that was probably going to be forthcoming. I do have it broken into 2 parts, and I want to clarify one piece of it. So I've got the construction observation, which is for the additional time for our field people to be out there for those extra couple of weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it was, and then the construction staking. We are actually under budget on our construction staking. The reason I have that in here is because it was additional work that we had to perform twice, that we shouldn't have had to perform twice. So I wanted it documented someplace for the benefit of the city. At the end of the day, this isn't really so if you approved this contract as is today, that 2,800 would be, how do I want to explain this? It'll be documented for the purposes of if you guys want to take action or have, deal with it through the contractor. We still are going to be $2,800 under budget on our staking budget. So it's going to be a wash from the standpoint of the city. It's not like we're going to take the 2,800 and charge you the 2,800 more than what we were going to charge you before. I'm not being very clear on that, but I put it in here for the purposes of documentation. If you want me to strike it, I could strike it right now, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm not worried about our budget from the staking standpoint. We had enough in there, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to see that there was an additional cost that you incurred, and depending on how you want to handle that. But we can talk about that. Then the rest of it is for the additional on-site observation. I'm probably being clear as mud on that staking
No,
part,
that's very clear to me. Thank you.
I'm more than happy to answer any more questions you might have on this, and we can go from there, I guess.
Okay, we'll go from left to right. Counselor Freely?
Sherry, do we budget accordingly for these kinds of contingencies, or is this
We do have a contingency fund. This is rather low, so.
Okay, good. Then I would make a motion that we move forward with the approval of this change order to not to exceed 19.7 for the additional services that have been provided to this point on the Midway Drive project.
Moved by Counselor Freely. Is there support?
Support for discussion.
Support by Counselor Johnson for discussion. Further discussion, Counselor Johnson.
So when was their substantial completion date originally?
September 27th, I believe. Yes, September 27th.
Because I know we had had a discussion about not changing that for this reason. Now, this is the second project this year that's gone over, and we have not changed the substantial completion date in order to hopefully recoup some of these additional costs from them. Are we still going to move forward with this contract in the same way that we should be billing them that 19.7 because they're the ones that had the issues? So I guess that's what I'm looking for. I can support this as long as we are going to follow up later and make sure we're asking them for the extra money, because we can say it here, and my concern is that it'll get forgotten when it comes to the time where we do the final payout, and I'd like to make sure we're starting to hold our contractors that if you're going to say a date, stick to it. And we can look at that, but that's where I'm at with this, is making sure that all of the people we work with are understanding that if you tell us a date, be realistic, otherwise give yourself more time.
The short answer is by not extending the substantial completion date a few weeks back, you have the ability to utilize that clause in the contract to recuperate additional costs that you incur as a city. Now, again, that's up to you if you want to, and there might be some pushback from the contractor, but in my mind, this is pretty cut and dried.
Thank you, Matt.
And that's always an option in the project development agreement moving forward. Contractors have some challenges. Some they create themselves, and some they don't because of weather or other conditions, or they find a finding of unknown substances that prevent them from, delaying the project moving forward. But the reason that it's in the project development agreement for a substantial completion date, go above and beyond. Historically, we have given those extensions based on under exigent circumstances. In this particular case, it's not an exigent circumstance. They waited a month in which to start the project. They delayed it even further. We did not approve the waiving of the substantial completion date, and we have the option, and I think we should, as Councilor Johnson, I think all of us indicate, move forward with taking action when appropriate for any costs above and beyond what we were supposed to have incurred, whether we are under budget or not. That money would not have been incurred had it not been for the delay by the contractor. And I think in this particular contract, we have, what you could say, valid options in which to recoup our costs. So thank you. Councilor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, I just have one quick question about the businesses along that drive. Are they impeded currently, or will they be, so everything is clear, equipment, machinery
Yes.
is off?
Yep, they have cleaned up, and they do have access to their business now, so everything should be
And then
okay.
the last portion that hopefully they should be able to complete by.
There shouldn't be much of a
with the
disruption
signage.
next summer, no, or next spring whenever they do the blacktop. They'll get by there pretty quick. It'll be a day, maybe.
Okay. And then in terms of the signage, is it stop signs, yield signs,
Yep.
directional signs?
Directional signs, street name signs, things like that, yeah.
But you're assuming that they will be able to get those up before we have some issues with weather?
Yeah, yes, the city actually went out last week and put up some temporary signs, which you shouldn't have had to do, but thankfully the public works crews did. So there are stop signs there now, at least, on
Okay.
some of those intersections.
Thank you,
so.
thank you.
And beyond that, we have issues with the Vermillion Drive intersection, the Cuyuna Drive intersection, which we'll address at some other time. So it has been moved and supported for the approval for the amendment for the services not to exceed $19,700, and we have the option of moving forward with recoup for that money based on the contract and the project development agreement. Is there any further discussion by councilors? Councilor Baraboo.
Yeah, this contractor really upset my angst from seeing contract work up all these years. I made a call to our Public Works Department to Bill Hennis about those stop signs, because I had gotten two calls, one from a person that lives on Vermillion and another one that almost got hit because they blew right through where those stop signs should have been. That contractor was contacted 3 different times to get those signs up, and they never got those signs up. So our Public Works, and I want to thank them, because I was a little hot under the collar when I talked to them about getting something there so we don't have a serious accident, because they come flying off of that highway. And if you get two cars colliding, one coming north and south and the other one going east and west, somebody could have gotten killed there. So I'm not happy with what that contractor did. Yeah, they ran into some other things, but this motion is correct, that we need to recoup our costs on this. And next spring, we'll find out how good their work was, if there's any bad spots in that blacktop. That's why we leave that last stuff, so if there's any bad soils underneath, it'll get corrected, so there won't be seams. So that's just my angst on this project. I was not happy because the mayor's right, they got started a month late from when they were supposed to, and I was not very happy. So, thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Appreciate it
While
very much.
Matt's still here, I want to bring up item number 15, approve resolution for change order number 3 for Midway Drive improvements for an increase in $7,225. And Matt can explain why this was necessary.
Matt?
Thank you. Yes, so I'm going to preface this by re-explaining the description under the purpose of the change order. It's probably not worded quite right. So that what we ended up doing was we switched out, after talking with the contractor and the public utilities, actually, we switched out the type of base that we were going to use for the light poles themselves, and it was due to the rock. And we knew the rock was going to be there, but as a precaution going into it, up front, we proactively decided, hey, we could probably use the screw-in bases, which is what we have used on other projects, but as we got into it a little further, we thought, you know what, let's just make sure, because the change order could have been substantial had we gone forward with the screw-in bases, and then after the fact, had to switch those out. So there was not larger than expected amounts of rock on the project. In fact, we underran that quantity quite a bit. So that question come up a couple different times in meetings and where we were gonna end up. As you saw the big boulders sitting out there, we did all right. We came in under budget on the rock. So there was not necessarily larger than expected amounts. We were more looking at anticipated potential expected rock conflicts with the light bases. So we switched them out. So what it ended up being was $425 per each as a difference, as an addition. So yep, it's a little bit of an additional cost, probably washed out and then some with the amount of rock that was saved, and we're still on a negative number on overall change orders for the project as it is, as you can see on the, so we're still doing very, very well in that respect. So I can answer any other questions you might have on that.
I'm fine with that, Matt. Anyone in the council? Councilor Paulson?
I was going to make a motion.
Okay.
I'll move to approve, and just want to also say thank you for your professionalism and your diligence. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome, yeah.
Moved by Councilor Paulson and supported by Councilor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
All right.
Thank you, Matt, as always.
Thank you. And due to the people in the audience, if it'd be okay with everybody, I'd like to move to item number 10, approve the repayment agreement with Virginia Public Utilities for the Amoresco Energy Services Improvement Project. This ties into the next item. So this is the agreement that Greg French and I have worked out with the Public Utilities Commission, and now we're bringing to the council for permission.
$1 million recovery?
They're going to do the $1 million upfront payment and also $60,000 per year, or per month, I'll read it again. $60,000 annually for 13 years as payment for the bonds.
Thank you.
Yep. We do have the signed copies from the utilities in Pam's office, correct, Pam? Okay.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
waiting for us to approve it.
Yeah. Okay, any counselor want to move this forward? Bueller? Counselor Johnson?
Mayor. Brett, one question with the the $60,000 annual payments. Is there any incentive for them to make those payments on time?
We have lots of ways to make incentive.
I know sometimes the turnaround between a bill from the utilities and the payment to the utilities can take a couple months, so I just want them to know we're serious about this. But I like that there's a one-time down payment at the beginning. I think that demonstrates their willingness and their understanding of the importance of this project. So I will make a motion to approve the repayment agreement between the City of Virginia and the Virginia Public Utilities.
Moved by Counselor Johnson. Is there
I'll
support?
support, Mayor.
Support by Counselor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And then the next item on the agenda is a review recommendation from Amoresco for financing for tax-exempt equipment lease purchase agreement, Project A. And we have George Eilertson from Northland Securities, and we have John Neville from Amoresco.
Mr. Arledson, Mr. John, please come move forward, and welcome, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. George Eilertson from Northland Securities, and of course, John Neville from
With
Amoresco.
Good morning, Mayor, council members.
Morning, gentlemen.
What I wanted to do, council, is just highlight the three financing bids that were received, kind of hit the highlights on that, and compare it to an open market financing like we had talked previously. So in your packets, I had put together a summary letter. You had perhaps also received a large spreadsheet from Amoresco noting the bids received from three different investment banks. So what I wanted to do, council, again, is point that out. We received three bids, or Amoresco on the city's behalf, rather, received three bids. And actually, let me take a quick step back. As we've talked about in previous meetings, what we're doing is splitting this into two financings, two separate lease financings, each under $1 million, to achieve a total financing need of $1,361,000. So this first financing is done for $848,615. The second for approximately $513,000. Like we've said in the past, that having two financings less than $1 million means that they're outside of that statutory debt limit. So again, that's just a refresher on why breaking this up into two financings. And again, why not doing it as one common general obligation bond like we'd considered in the past. So again, three financing bids were received. And actually, the lowest interest rate was from D.A. Davidson, but when factoring in costs of issuance or origination costs, Huntington National, which provided a 2.78% interest rate, results in the low financing. So what we look at is the total payments over the term of the financing. Theirs is approximately $1,048,000. Just to step back for a moment and to compare that to an open market financing, a general obligation bond utilizing the city's bond rating. Just as a comparison, again, 2.78% on the lease financing with Huntington Capital. Looking at an open market general obligation bond with a 15-year financing term, the interest rate would be about 0.5% less, about 2.2%. You might think initially then that isn't that the better financing approach for the city? Interest rate, yes, but when factoring in costs of issuance, the bond rating fee, bond counsel, et cetera, it actually works out very close. It's almost a push. With a traditional bond issue, a general obligation bond through the city, there's an annual fee called the paying agent. That's the service that sends your finance director a notification that, hey, you have a payment due semi-annually, and there's annual fees associated with that. So factoring that in, actually the lease comes out with a better result for the city. Now, of course, committee of the whole format today, we're not approving the financing, but rather this would be recommended for future approval by the city council. Certainly, we've worked closely with city staff and with the city's bond attorney, Mia Thibodeau from Freiberger Buchanan. As a result of that review with bond counsel, she's actually recommended that we delay action on the financing at next week's city council meeting. This is not a red flag item. This is when she reviewed the notice that was put in the paper as well as the contract wording with Amoresco, she recommended a couple of changes be made. Very minor changes to the notice, noting, again, just making sure that we meet the publication requirements, which is getting the notice in the paper so many days in advance of a meeting, as well as a couple of changes to the contract with Amoresco. Again, not items of concern from my perspective, but what it does is it pushes back action on these items to the 19th. and I know I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but the 19th is another committee of the whole. Our request is that you make a brief special meeting on the 19th to award the financing, mayor and council, and also to approve the contract or revised contract with Amoresco. That way, again, we're satisfying bond council review, crossing all the Ts, dotting the Is with them. And again, that would just be a brief special meeting on the 19th, before or after the committee of the whole meeting, whatever your preference there. So that is certainly, our recommendation is stay with the financing or recommend approving the financing to Huntington Capital. We did check with them this morning, again, talking about moving the financing out 7 days to the 19th. They are willing to hold their interest rate of 2.78 for another week. So they're fine with that. They did request that if the city is willing to call that special meeting for the 19th, if there might be action considered today, allowing the mayor and the administrator to, again, kind of get documentation ready for the closing. It'll be a quick closing on that. You get the financing considered on the 19th with a potential closing the next day on the 20th. So again, Mayor, Council, if you have any questions, please here to address those.
Okay, thank you. We'll move forward. Councilor Paulson.
Mayor, thank you so much, George, for explaining this. I do have a couple questions. Who will be revising the contract? Is that Freiberger Buchanan, or?
So sure, John Neville here. So we just had a discussion this morning with bond counsel, Mia Thibodeau. And just a couple issues that need to be reviewed with her. We do these contracts all the time, so we're pretty comfortable with them. She is not quite as comfortable with the contract, so I just want to walk through with her a couple of items which may need a minor change.
Okay, so
Maybe not.
Amoresco will be working with
Bond counsel.
bond counsel, and then that contract will be coming forward to us for that review, to review those changes as well? Or no, will it be not, or will that be something it's administratively handled?
That would come to all of us.
All of us, yeah.
Okay, and then
Can I
sure,
jump
go
in
ahead,
there,
John.
please? So my thought is that review of the contract and any minor changes are going to occur within a day or two. My thought is to have that then available to city council and available for review at your next city council meeting. No action required, just it's there to review. And then the action on that contract would occur at this special meeting on the 19th. Acceptable to council.
And then thank you for that. And then the next question I had is, have either of your firms worked with Huntington in the past, and have you had reviews on their performance?
Our firm has not, but I would certainly think Amoresco, who does a lot of lease financings nationally, I would certainly think Huntington has been.
So yes, we work with Huntington on projects similar to this across the country. I could get an exact count, but I know there's probably tens of millions of dollars of contracts that we work with them, and they wouldn't be on our list if they weren't acceptable. Let's just put it that way.
That's my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would suggest maybe, with comments from the other councilors, I would suggest maybe we hold a city council meeting on the 19th at 8:30 in the morning, and then have the committee whole meeting right after that. That way we could expedite, we'll have all information, the council will have the information moving forward, we'll have an opportunity to review it, digest it, and then have the council, special council meeting 8:30 for this particular issue, and then move on to the committee whole agenda for, the regular scheduled items then. Would that be acceptable, Britt? And would that be acceptable for the rest of the council? If
We would move having a special meeting on the 19th at 8:30 for this reason.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Johnson. Is there support? Support by Councilor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So is there any more discussion or questions you have for Mr. Eilertson or for John from Amoresco?
I just have one
Yes,
comment.
Councilor Bearable.
That will satisfy what you gentlemen were looking for, this motion, so you can tell Huntington that it's on the agenda for that date? So your 7-day window doesn't disappear?
Sorry, could you?
With the special meeting on the 19th, which is a 7-day window longer, the motion that we just passed will satisfy Huntington's request.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Bearable. Is there anybody else? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. John?
So if I can be so bold, a couple other things to suggest. So based on this newspaper notice, so if that could be approved to go out very shortly for this meeting then on the 19th for the approval.
You don't need approval for that, but Pam takes
Oh,
care of that, yes.
okay.
Yep.
We'll handle it. Yeah, we'll handle that.
And then just, I want to clarify, I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I know there was a couple of questions that came up from council members. So I'm here to respond to those questions, if that's acceptable.
Please move forward. Thank you.
Okay. So one, there was a question about contributions from the city on the energy efficiency project to the tune of $225,000, which was part of the original project for the 2.4 million before it was separated. So the answer to that is no. There is no more contribution required because of your approval now of the $1 million plus contribution from the utility has eliminated that requirement for a contribution from the city. So now, the original project was slightly under 20 years, which is state contract requirements. So with the contribution from the utility now, and no contribution from the city, it's now down to just a tad under 14 years. So that contribution, with the $60,000 annual contribution attached, really makes this project attractive to the city. So that was a real, so credit to a number of the folks here and to Britt on working all that out with the utility.
Very good.
Okay, so does that clarify? I know that was your question from last meeting. Another question came up about the lights at, correct me if I'm wrong now. Help me out here, folks. Midway, the outdoor ice arena?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So in the project, yes, they're in. And then the lamps by Milford, is that?
Yes, Mill 40,
Yeah.
which is owned by the
Which are
school.
owned by the school are not included. Okay, does that, did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And then I will want, one more request for, so that's, we just finished Project A. So Project B needs to start 3 weeks after Project A, so the 3 weeks actually starts tomorrow, based on bond council recommendations to how to keep this off the, the book, so to speak, for the city council. So if we could do, if you'll provide us the acceptance to issue the next RFP for financing for Project B tomorrow, we can start the process for Project B.
We have already made that motion
We've
Oh.
already
at a
approved
previous
that.
meeting, yes.
Oh.
Previous meeting, right.
Okay, very
But you're
good.
good, we're good to go on that. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Right.
that's it. Any other questions for me?
No.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Okay.
Nice to see you again. We have other people in the audience that are waiting for, we might as well move them around too, huh?
Yes.
Okay, so what would be the next item on the agenda? I see we have individuals from our Park and Rec Commission, and then we have a couple of citizens. Ma'am, what are you here for, if I may ask?
14, if we can move her up right now.
Okay,
The request for fiscal year 2020 funding for the community gardens within Virginia.
okay, thank you. Would you please come forward? And please state your name for the record. And welcome to the Virginia City Council. We come to the podium? Yeah. Sure. And so have we set our budget already for 2020? Yes. We did the preliminary budget, right? Okay, thank you.
Oh, workable.
Thank you. And while you're passing these out, I know that we've been very supportive in the past of growing together, the community gardens. I know there's a collaborative effort, as you can see on your brochure, from a variety of sources. I know we do support the greenhouse with a budget in that regard, and we provide in-kind services to the Growing Together in the Virginia Community Gardens. We have done it in the past. I think we continue to do so. We've had a commitment to help you be successful in here, and now you're seeking a budgetary item from the City Council in the amount of $8,000 annually. Is that correct?
$3,000, Mayor.
$3,000 annually. Okay, thank you. Please introduce yourself and welcome to the City Council.
Good morning, Mayor Cuffey, city staff and council members. My name is Lori Scheibe, and I am the coordinator for Growing Together Virginia Community Gardens. I'm here today to request funding in the amount of $3,000 for the Gardens program next season. The Gardens were started in 2016 by a group of citizens who wanted to bring the availability of growing one's own food back to the community. As someone who grew up in Virginia, I remember the backyard gardens of my parents and grandparents, along with many of my friends' parents and neighbors. Now we do this as a community. Currently, there are 4 community garden sites containing a total of 54 plots located on the City of Virginia property. We thank you for that. Additionally, we maintain a 5th garden on the AEOA Youth Foyer property on 12th Street South with 15 raised bed gardens. The gardens were almost 100% utilized this season. Only 1 garden was not fully planted. Many gardeners had multiple plots, and some had plots in multiple garden sites. One of our volunteer garden site coordinators, John Cope, stated in an email to me that he has had so many positive comments from people walking or riding bikes on the trail of Bailey's Lake, and from people in the Laurentian apartments who can see the gardens from there. The gardens themselves generated $705 of rental income this past season, which is the most since their inception. There were also roughly a third of the garden plots that were leased free, some to a group home serving developmentally disabled adults, several to programs that serve people with mental illness, several to elderly and people with limited income, and 6 to a collaborative effort between the Gardens, Dr. Keith Peterson of Essentia Health, and the SWAP program, providing employment for youth in our community. These last 6 plots were a pilot program based on a program called Incredible Edible out of the UK that Dr. Peterson wanted to implement here. The plots grow food that can be harvested by anyone who needs or wants it. The SWAP youth planted and helped maintain the gardens for the 6 weeks of their program. After that, there were several volunteers who helped maintain and harvest the produce. We hope to increase awareness of that program in the coming year. The rental income is enough to cover most of the low-budget maintenance costs of the garden, such as tools and some compost. Our larger project expenses are about $7,000 per year. Essentia Health, through grants to our parent organization, the Iron Range Partnership for Sustainability, and the Rutabaga Project, have awarded roughly $4,000 per year. I am requesting that the City of Virginia contribute $3,000 to cover the rest of the budget for fiscal year 2020. I would like to publicly thank Ed Alto of the Public Works Department for keeping our water tanks full during the season. Without the supplemental water supply, we would not have had the beautiful gardens that we did. And I would also like to thank Brian Silber, Parks and Rec Director, for being so supportive of our gardens. Thank you so much for your time and consideration of our request. Do you have any questions?
Hey, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for coming. I think we all are well aware of the community gardens, the Rutabaga Project, the Iron Range Partnership for Sustainability, and in conjunction with some work with the Friends of the Greenhouse moving forward, and of course our in-kind services through our Park and Rec Director, Brian Silber, and our Public Works Director, Eddie Alto. So thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments regarding that? We'll move over to Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, I got to help coordinate the youth foyer gardens when I was down there, and it is a really good opportunity for folks that may not have or have never gardened. What does the other, you alluded to that you're getting the grants. What does that other go for? What does the 7, do you get a salary? Are you an employee of the gardens, or are you, okay.
I do get a salary. I receive $875 a month for 8 months of the year.
And that's fine, you deserve it.
Yes.
You do more work than that's probably even worth. But so I just want to clarify that. And then I do have a question about prioritization of plots. You said you had all but one rented. How do you, if somebody new comes in and wants to rent, how do you manage people who are rented for the last several years and a new person who wants to come in? How do you make those kinds of decisions?
We do put out a request first to those that have gardened last year, but I put brochures out, we put it out on Facebook for new people that want to come, and there haven't been no problems so far in accommodating new people that have wanted to garden. I think we had probably
And how many would you say are repeat gardeners? So this is one of those, a kind of program where there's the people, your base, and then there's people that kind of fade in and out every year when it comes to gardening. There's some people that drop out for any number of reasons, so.
Yes, one lady this year for the Foyer Gardens had done it for 2 years, and it was an experience for her small child, and she enjoyed it, and she said, you know, although she didn't want a plot for this year, she would be more than willing to donate the cost of a plot to have someone else come in and garden.
That's great to hear, and I would, if you don't, I've just skimmed this, but having that as an option for people who maybe enjoyed gardening when they were more able, and then having them not be able to, maybe that's something you could use in your literature as an opportunity for other support for gardening. But I'm comfortable at $3,000. Where would that come out of? What budget? Where?
Else will have to be cut $3,000 to accommodate.
So I guess I'd like us to have the staff have that discussion about where the money can come from. Unfortunately, we don't print it here in Virginia, so. But I think this is a good opportunity. And I see some other lights on, so I'll like to hear some other input.
Councilor Beyondich?
Coming. And you just touched on what I was going to ask. If, looking at your brochure, if people were willing to purchase a plot for somebody else, if there's an opportunity for the public to have that knowledge that they could donate the $30 or whatever, and if you had people that wanted to garden but didn't really have the money to do that, that it could be paid for by somebody else.
Yes, and we are working on revising the brochure.
Okay.
And so I can certainly add that on there clearly.
Sure. Thank you.
Councilor Barnzelli?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate those gardens around the city of Virginia. I get a lot of positive phone calls. But the one at Jefferson's, the old Jefferson School, the corn stalks are up. Not this year, they've gotten, 2 weeks ago, I think they took them. But last year, they were there through a winter. And I got a lot of calls on that saying, if nothing else, could you go over there and take them out of the ground? And I said, I'll try to. Well, never did. But that's the only problem I've seen is, and especially at that north side one, Jefferson, if they could clean them up like after the season,
Yes. And
pull them out of the ground. Thank
we
you.
are supposed to do that, and we are looking at revitalizing that garden next season. We already have funding to hopefully put raised bed gardens in there, which would neaten it up and make it so much more accessible for people that cannot garden. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Paulson?
Mayor, thank you for coming, and the gardens are beautiful. They really are adding to the city and to the experience of the Mesabi Trail along that path. It's beautiful when we bike there as a family. I have a couple questions. Does the Lakes and Beautification Group, do they do any donating to the gardens?
Not that I am aware of.
And I think that might be a good fit going forward for continued funding, because I feel like that's really their area of focus. The other question I had too is, has Mesabi Trail been asked to participate in any of that?
My first season, so I apologize, I'm not.
No, I think that they would be another great partner
Yes, I will certainly explore that.
in that. And then my last question is for Sherry. Have we budgeted anything for this in the past? Have we contributed anything in the past, or is this the first annual request?
This is the very first request.
The very first request? Okay, thank you.
Counselor Bearable.
I have one suggestion for your brochure. You've got the sites listed, but you don't have a listing of how many actual plots are there for each site. So people would have an idea when they look, and then they could see there's 5, then they could maybe pick, and if there's no availability, they'll know in the future how many plots there. And if you add plots, just change your brochure from year to year if you add more plots, but that would be interesting for the public to know. Yeah, because it's nice, your brochure here, but my first thought when I looked through it, I don't know how many plots are on each one of these sites. So, you know, somebody might see one with twice as many, they might ask you if there's availability, you know, but I think this is a very good program, and I like the idea of staff finding out where we can find the $3,000 on this. So I think we can do that by the council meeting, Britt. So we'll make some type of decision at the council meeting next week, from my perspective.
Okay, a couple of things real quick, and then we'll go to Counselor Johnson. You know, budgeting, you know, for these kind of community activities are important that we support our community. But, you know, I don't mean to say but, there are many groups that come before us asking for a donation for this or for that and for this organization, for that organization. And we have always tried to do what we can to help fund or find in-kind services to provide assistance to, which we have done in the in-kind services department. I also serve on the boards of 2 different organizations that donate not only their time and their talents, but also structural things. I'm going to give the example. One of the groups that I belong to donated the shed for the for the garden, or I mean for the
Farmers market.
For the farmers market down there. So I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to tap into different organizations to cover the cost of the $3,000 you have. By coming to the city council, I would urge you to look at other suggested places in which to try to recover some of your costs associated. There's a lot of communities out there that would donate. Maybe the Virginia Foundation might be, you know, those kind of things. So utilizing other opportunities within the community, private and public partnerships are very important. We're going to try to do what we can to take a look at that. But I know that in the past, when groups have come to us, you know, we've urged them to look at other sources of opportunities that can be developed to help support their particular organization. And so I think you have really some untapped resources that are available. I'm not saying we shouldn't be looking at it, because I think we should be, and we shall have something by the next quarter. But I think that these organizations, at least the 2 that I belong to that have contributed here, would likely contribute more. And I don't want to speak for them now, but so moving forward. So thank you very much. Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, Luke Chop is the chair of the Lakes Beautification Committee, so that would be your contact. He offices out of Wells Fargo. And do we need a motion to direct staff to look, or is that just something?
We can just bring it to the council on Tuesday.
All right, I appreciate it. I think this is great, and it really does beautify the areas. I know one of the concerns at one time with the one downtown was the neighbors, but the neighbors at whatever establishment is next door actually have a tendency to be protective of that garden. A program I worked with before helped build those beds. So I think there's getting to be more and more community buy-in, and it's great that we have a group of people tending the gardens instead of just 1 or 2. So thank you for your work.
Yeah, you're not only cleaning the remnants of the garden at the end of the season at that particular location, there are other debris that you have to collect there as well. So it's unfortunate, but I guess that's the nature of the beast. So we'll have staff take a look at that, and thank you for coming to the council meeting, and we'll see what we can do.
All right, thank you so very much.
Yes, and thank you so much.
I would like to jump around again on the agenda and go down to number 18, which is review recommendation for increase of park and recreation rental rates. And we have Brian Silver here and 2 of the members of the Park and Rec Commission as well.
Brian, welcome. Thank you for your patience. And Mr. Mohar and Mr. Gilnes, thank you for hanging out, and members of the Park and Rec Commission, thank you.
In your packet, you have a recommendation letter from myself and the Parks and Recreation Commission. This letter outlines the current rental rates that we are charging for several of our different facilities and the fact that we are not charging for several different facilities. In addition, we do not charge for some of the amenities that we provide, such as sound system or video systems for many of our renters. The Park and Recreation Commission has reviewed this. We've also looked at equivalent facilities throughout the Iron Range and have come before you today with these new recommendations for rental rates. One of the biggest changes that we are recommending that we make to our rental rates is that if a renter requires items that we do not have and their rental will cost us money. For an example, a major concert at the Miners Memorial Building. We need to bring in satellite toilets for a large-scale concert. That ends up costing us money. At this point, we are not recouping any of that money, so we have a beautiful concert going on in the facility, but yet the city is losing money on that renter. So we would like to pass along, at our cost, those costs to the renter.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Before we go around, I'll just quick comment. I've reviewed the recommendations for the Park and Rec Commission. I think, they've taken, they've always had an active role, but now they've had a voice moving forward through their committee, through their commission, and through you as our Park and Rec Director. Now, I know these rates will have to be adjusted when the new Miners Memorial comes into play.
Yes.
But I'm very supportive of this. It's a very fair way of which moving forward. It should have been done a long time ago. I'm glad you're bringing this forward now. I thank the commission for their efforts in moving forward and coordinating and cooperating and putting together this request before us today. I'm very supportive of it. Let's move on to the rest of the city councilors. Do we have one? Councilor Johnson.
Mayor. Will the Shelter 1, Shelter 2, Shelter 3, will they have labels on them so we can identify them?
Yes, we would put labels on them. In addition, we would be adding picnic tables to all of them. We did receive in several, or probably about 24 new picnic tables this year that we are assembling, and we will have those out next spring. So each of these picnic shelters will have picnic tables, would have a sign on them that says what picnic shelter that they are, and a notice of who to contact or the website to go to reserve the picnic shelter. In addition, when a shelter is reserved, we would have a reserved sign that we could place on the shelter. Therefore, we would be able to communicate to the general public, hey, this shelter is reserved today, and somebody has the right to be there. You may be asked to leave.
And my other thought as we're moving forward, this is maybe these shelters in the future could be named. Maybe that's something that the commission can look at, is naming Shelter 1, Shelter 2 for people in our city who have done things. We've got a wall of fame out there, and maybe bringing some history back into these shelters and naming them for people or for events or for landmarks that used to exist. That might be something that one will add history to our city, but then it'll give some definition to what it's just something. I think this is great. I know that you've been working very hard on a web-based reservation system, making sure we're getting paid when we rent out buildings. I think you've done an amazing job at bringing Parks and Rec into the century, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the commission, the work you all are doing on this, and I'm in full support of this. I think it's time.
And I have one question before we go to Councilor Freely. Some of these golf courses in these community centers that when I toured for the new Miners project, and you looked at some of the parks and asked them questions about, do they have Park and Rec commissions, which many of them don't, some do. the question I have is they have members of the community that have the opportunity, and this extends to what Councilor Johnson had indicated, that they would actually buy a picnic table, or they would pay on an annual basis in memory of so-and-so for whether it's a tree, whether it's whatever the case may be. Now, I know, I think you've already started considering these things. I know that'll come forth in the future, but, when Councilor Johnson indicated maybe we name it after, somebody who's been part of the community, I think by donating some of these things in memory of somebody, like they do on the golf courses for these benches, can really, help reduce the cost, and recognize those people who want to contribute to the beauty of our park and recreation program. So thank you, Brian, for all your hard work, and for the commission for bringing this forward. Councilor Friedli.
If I may, Mayor, go ahead and make a motion to approve the recommendation for what I would consider to be nominal and reasonable increase of park and recreation rental rates.
Moved by Councilor Friedli. Did you want to continue with that? I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
No.
Okay, moved by Councilor Friedli. Is there support? Support by Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian, I think you've done an amazing job throughout Park and Rec. I think it's just wonderful, and the excitement and the enthusiasm you can just feel the energy. So I just really want to say thank you. I do want to maybe make one suggestion going forward, especially with the new miners project. And after an experience at the Klein Cupoletti building, I know that you've made some changes regarding no keys, or the public is not accessing a key any longer. And my recommendation would be, would there be some system, or maybe like a deadbolt that you could put on, like a master deadbolt, or like a fob, like a key fob at a workout facility, like when the miners, I guess, is created and built, there'll be different locations in different areas that people will be renting and utilizing. So would there be an electronic keyless or key component to that could be incorporated? The experience at the Klein Cupoletti building of just that we had gotten locked out, and then of just leaving it open if you have your possessions in there, if you have food in there, without that freedom to kind of come and go, it would be really convenient to have that access of a key fob.
And yes, we are looking at a key fob system. Have not determined exactly what type of system that will be, if it'll be a fob or a card system, but for the new facility, we are evaluating that.
And as well as like on the Klein Cupoletti building, or on any of the rental kind of in and out, and that might even minimize staff having to, come in and out at various specific times that the places are rented. So I think that was just my one recommendation going forward, but it sounds like you're already on it. Thank you.
And what comes with that is the safety and security component policy moving forward. So I'm sure you're considering all those things well with the automatic access. And the reason I say that, working at the airport, working on the computerized card access system, created some, even for rental places, created some security problems and some safety problems and some criminal damage problems. So I'm sure that's part of the policy you're working out. But that just makes sense, Councilor Paulson, that we do that. I concur. So anything else? Anybody else have anything before you vote? Councilor Baraboo?
Brian, just a couple of questions. You look down at the Cupoletti Arena and the pageant arena, you've added a fee in the pageant arena. No, that's not in addition to any of the contract things we have for fees.
No, this would be, say, over the summer, you wanted to have an event.
A wedding or something like that in there?
Yeah, okay. I wouldn't see a wedding back in the pageant arena. Pageant arena is the back arena.
No.
But for example, the Home and Boat Show, we have never charged the Home and Boat Show anything for use of the back arena. They are the big group that people associate with using the back arena, other than for ice skating, because most of the springtime, other than the Home and Boat Show, our baseball program is set up for doing indoor practices in there, and that is a completely different contract, so that would not affect our agreements that we have with the school. It would just be for these events that want to utilize our second arena. And one of the reasons we're putting this into place now is because here in a couple of years, we will be moving into a new facility that has 2 sheets of ice or 2 arena-type size venues that we will want to be recapturing revenue from. So we're beginning the transition of our pricing structure for what we anticipate will be increases for the new minors, and adding this fee for our current back rink or the Paget Arena is one of those first steps.
Okay. I think you need to contact that organization before you put, because that'd be a double fee. It'd be 500 plus 300, so you're talking.
Well, they have already booked for this coming year.
Okay.
So, and that's why we had requested these new rates go into effect January 1st. So it would be for those people making a reservation after January 1st. We will not go back and upcharge people that already have reservations.
Okay, that's
It
perfect.
would be for future reservations.
The shelters, now, if they're not booked by a particular organization, group, or stuff, they're free, they're still free for the public.
They're still
right?
free for the public to come use, but it does give you the opportunity to reserve the shelter.
Okay.
You'll notice that a couple of the shelters have varying prices. It's due to whether or not the shelter has electricity. If the shelter has electricity, it's a little bit more expensive. If it's a smaller shelter, it's a little less expensive.
Okay, thanks
So-
for answering those questions. That's done a good job. Thank you.
Okay, moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. We'll go through one more item for the Viking Coca-Cola thing.
Yes.
And then we'll take a quick break. Britt?
Yes, the next item is the contract with Viking Coca-Cola for supplies of products at the Miners Complex. And I'll let Brian speak, and then I do have one concern when you're done talking, Brian.
Okay.
Just quick.
Yes.
With the city taking back concessions during non-Baja events at the miners, we have begun to get our concession stand equipment and set up a concession stand, and we need some form of pop and juice and sport drink vendor. So had contacted both PepsiCo and Coca-Cola and received proposals from both of them. And it is our recommendation that we go with our hometown vendor of Viking Coca-Cola. They have been working well with us, and they are ready to be our supplier here for the next several years until we get ready to move into the new miners, and we will open this up again to evaluate all of our options.
Thank you, Brian. Britt, your concern?
The concern that I have is I see that Viking's got the option to terminate, but we don't have the option to terminate the contract. So I
Okay.
think we need to add that paragraph in there, that we have the option that if they're not performing, they need to, we have the option to.
I think the words were out of my mouth. That's good, yeah, thank you.
Yep, thank you. That was my only concern with the contract. Thank you.
But with that amendment likely to be made, your recommendation is Viking Coca-Cola?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you. Any Counselor Freely?
What's the length of that? I didn't,
It would be for the next 2 seasons.
2 seasons. When I used to coach, and we had exclusive sponsorship through Coca-Cola for distribution at the schools that I were at, they made agreements with the schools to be able to provide scoreboards, padded ends to the walls in the gyms with logos and so on.
They no longer do scoreboards, but they do signboards. They have worked into this agreement that they will print us up banners. Throughout the year, we just tell them what we want, and they will produce the banners for us. They're also willing to purchase sponsorships on dasher boards inside. Unfortunately, with the price of scoreboards these days, they no longer sponsor scoreboards, but there are several programs that they have that are available to us when we are under contract, that if we sell X amount of product,
they'll provide
that
those
they will.
additional amenities, so to
Yes.
speak. Yeah, that's
They are also willing to provide us some free beverages for giveaways for different events and everything. So we'll be working with several of our different organizations in if we want to provide a bottle of water for officials or something like that during games, we can have that waiting for them in their locker room. Just want to make sure that it is not going to be a violation for anything for the high school, for the arena to do anything like that.
Just unfortunate with the potential for, I mean, not potential, but the ongoing process towards a dual arena that's going to be there with multiple scoreboards, that they wouldn't consider that's going to be perpetual advertising on their behalf. So I
Yes.
think they should rethink that on behalf of us as a community, but that's just my opinion.
And I think in addition to the contract, it was pointed out, and I read through the thing, it says 5 years on there. I think we need to amend that in the, to accomplish only that short window period before the new minors goes into play, so it doesn't carry over into that. So make those two little adjustments there.
And I will have that changed agreement in the packet for the council.
Okay, thank you. And I'd be comfortable with that. Counselor Paulson.
Mayor, is this something that needed an RFP to go out, or did an RFP go out, or was it just you went out to kind of see what was out there?
I went to the two major vendors and contacted them.
Okay, and I know Coca-Cola.
I also even contacted Nori to see if
That's
they
my
were
next
interested in, they pretty much told me, thank you for calling, but we can't meet your needs.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. I just wanted to make sure that we had covered anybody that was in our local area, so I appreciate that.
Counselor Johnson. Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Does this affect any of our vending machines anywhere else in the city?
No. Yes, if we want them to, it can. The vending machines in the miners are going to be replaced. We will be removing all those vending machines, putting high-energy efficient glass front vending machines that we will be controlling the product that is in them, and we'll also be receiving the revenue from those. Currently, I think we receive, I think it broke down to 10 cents per beverage that was sold in our vending machines at the miners. We'll be upping that to about $1 per beverage that is sold.
And then with how many vending machines do we have dispersed throughout the city on city property? I mean, is that something we should be looking at just for the efficiency? If we're running a 1980 Coke machine in the basement, we're probably supplementing that.
Yeah, and there's some nuances with that. That Coke machine in the basement was bought by the union.
Yes.
It's not owned by the city. So
That's why it's 50 cents a pop.
That's why it's 50 cents a pop.
Well,
yes.
I just want to make sure we're being
We
consistent
have had a
across.
discussion, and the library used to have a pop machine, now they don't. So there's been discussion with Brian, and Brian did get agreement from Viking saying if there's other places in the city, they would be willing to come work with us if we
Okay.
wanted more
That answers my
locations.
question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Counselor Johnson. Okay. Counselor Paulson.
One more quick. Is the ATM being utilized currently at the miners?
Yes, it is.
Are you seeing some activity with that
When we have events.
when you have events?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this weekend, it was a hot button.
Yes.
People were using it.
I think I've paid that fee several times. Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, Counselor Bearable.
Yeah, I'll just make one comment on that ATM machine. It's the same vendor that we use at our Savior's Lutheran Church. Talk to Mr. Thomas, he'll give you the statistical data on the usage, how much it's used, and what your profitability. You might be able to get a new contract with more money from him. Shh, I didn't tell you that. But I'll make the motion that we go forward with the corrections on this agreement with Viking Coca-Cola Bottling Company with those corrections for the council meeting.
Okay, moved by Counselor Bearable. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Counselor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll take just a real short break here, and we'll resume. 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We took a quick break on the community hall meeting. We're back on city business, so we'll move to Britt for the next item on the agenda.
And I apologize, we keep jumping around today, but I want to get the people that are in attendance up to the podium. So we'll go down to item number 17, which is review city sewer manhole and street and sewer line on homeowner's property at 710 2nd Street South, and we have Lee Gorsha here to discuss this.
Mr. Gorsha, welcome to the city council meeting. Please state your name for the record, and we'll see if we can answer your question.
My name is Lee Gorsha, homeowner at 710 2nd Street South in Virginia here.
Okay, thank you. Would you please briefly describe to the council the issue that you have?
This past winter, there's a manhole located right in front of my house. It froze at, the design, I don't know if you got the picture of my little picture of the Y. It's at the bottom of the manhole. And it comes and it goes like this. It froze right there because what happened is it froze, it created like a beaver dam and backed up the sewer, up the pipe into my basement. And how I found that out, because when the city department opened the manhole, they started chipping out. It was frozen. For some reason, I'm not sure why it froze really bad this year, quite a bit. It's usually a lot of steam. I don't know if the city didn't flush their steam out in the lake and keeps the water and everything warm, but anyhow, it backed up into my basement. So I had Roto-Rooter come, try to unplug it, and all this water kept on coming, sewer water. I'm like, where in the heck's all this sewer water coming from? So I'm pounding on my neighbors, saying, hey, are you flushing? Can you stop using your thing? They said yes, and it kept on coming. So after that came, and then I talked to the city department, I found out 4 people behind me are connected to my sewer line through my property, which I have an issue with. I don't see the easement in my paperwork that I got when I bought the house, or any other easements of that sewer line going through my property line. So I contacted the city, and what they did was saying that there's a lip. My sewer line sat about an inch or somewhere around there below entering the thing, and it's supposed to raise up. Well, I said, that's not the problem. It froze at the Y. So we need to lower the manhole. Here's my pipe sitting below the manhole. They rose it up. But I was saying you should raise it up so the flow out of my pipe drops off like a ledge and empties out my line. Can't happen the way it's designed. So I'm here today is saying, well, I don't want to come home after going down to cities for a few days and have my basement with 2 inches of water again, sewer water and everything else. Okay, that was 7 trash cans full of shop backing, cleanup, and a whole week of mopping, wiping things down, and everything else. So, the city didn't correct my problem by raising it up. The problem was in the manner where it froze. Years ago, it froze. There was a clog at that Y, and I caught it just enough time because you can see when it plugs up, it comes through my manhole in my basement. Once it unplugged it, it drained out nicely. But once it clogs at that Y, it backs up like a beaver dam. So I'm here today is saying, well, if we can't correct the problem at the manhole, then I want the city to move everybody off my line. I was told it's my line, my problem, so I'm here today to say, hey, if it's my problem, my sewer line, as that I was told, those people are going to get off my line and get the city line off my property. It wasn't on there with the easement. It's not in my records. If there's an easement there now, it must have been put on there just recently. I don't know. But there's no easement in my records for that sewer line going through my property.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple questions, Mr. Gorsha, and then we'll go to our city staff. They've been addressing the issue. They're aware of your the concern that you have. Now, the line itself, is it on your property?
Yes.
Okay. And the sewer line runs, I think you had a survey done a while back.
Yep.
And so it does fall on your property. Yes. And that sewer line services your house and 4 others, is that correct?
5 others, my neighbors included.
Okay, 5 others. So
I didn't find out the 4 until after I talked to the city people.
Okay, so now you've had, this has been, a line has been in there for several years, and how long have you had this problem? I mean, when did you first discover the issue with the water in the basement?
I had 3 issues with it, not including this last one, so a total of 4 times it has happened.
Okay, within.
But not as severe as this last one, and this is the first time I knew that I was found out that the 4 people behind me are connected to my line because the water kept coming and filled up my whole basement, which I never knew those guys were behind me connected, because I couldn't find out where all this water was coming, because I was pounding my poor neighbors getting yelled at. It's like, stop flushing your toilet and everything else.
Okay, so the 4 times this happened to you was within what time, from a year, 2 years?
About a decade.
Well, over the last 10 years, okay. So we have addressed the issue for you. We've asked staff to consider it. We do have 2 staff people here that can maybe give the rest of the city council some information and update on that sewer line that you have running across your property. We have our park and we have our public works director, Mr. Ed Alto, and we have from our engineering, Bill Hennis. So could either one of you give us some information about where we're at here? You just have a seat for a moment, Mr. Gorsha, thank you, and we'll have our Public Works Director come up and give us an update on what he's done and what he's seen in the investigation he's conducted over the course of the last month or so. Ed?
First issue, you were not frozen. You were misinformed by one of our employees. The line was not froze.
At the Y it was froze.
No, it wasn't.
I should have took pictures of it.
It wasn't froze.
He sat there and chiseled all the ice on that
I
line.
understand
I was right
that.
there watching.
I understand that, but the line was not froze.
Okay, the line portion.
I was there, I looked at it, and I told you where that main line comes into our manhole was low. We fixed that for you. Raised that up. That line that runs all the way to the other houses is immaculate. There's not a crack, there's not a break in it, there's nothing in it. And the fact of the matter is, we don't own it. That is considered private line tied to our main. If you're having a problem from your line coming into the main, I don't know. Your line comes out the west side of your house, comes into that center main, right?
Go to the line that runs through my property, out to the
Which
main.
is a main
Yep.
that ties all the other houses together.
Calling that the main, yes.
Yeah, well, it's a big line. Your 4-inch comes into the side of that. Because we filmed that whole line up as far as I could, which is not our line, we're not responsible for it. The person that was there, when they opened that line up, it wasn't froze, everything let loose. So where that lip was is where it was caught. Now, if that would have froze, our lines would have froze going the other ways too, which it wasn't. We had flow going it flows to the east of you, towards the utilities,
'Cause it's a dead
dumps
end.
in a line, and then it goes down 7th Avenue.
All I'm saying is that it froze at the Y. Watched them chiseled chiseled it all out.
Okay.
With this bar.
Has it backed up since we fixed the manhole?
It's not cold enough. It hasn't frozen.
But you haven't had an issue?
Nope. I only have problems when it's wintertime.
Okay.
Well, going by what I was told, it wasn't froze. We had an inexperienced guy there. He might have chiseled a little bit there. I don't know. But we fixed that lip. There is no lip there anymore. And according to engineering, that's all private. So wherever you want to go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Alto, appreciate it. Bill, could you add a little bit of information? Bill Hennis, from our engineering department, I know you did some research on looking at the plat and the line itself. Bill?
Yeah, what I did is spend some time looking at the area. There's 8 houses back in that area, and there's either 4 or 5 houses going into this line. And if we go 2 more houses to the west, there's basically the same scenario serving another 2 or 3 houses. All these houses were constructed back in about 1910, which is the Virginia Rainy Lake sawmill. So I'm assuming that they're all company houses. Virginia Rainy Lake Mill was classic in town. All of Virginia Rainy Lake Addition is kind of the same way, where they just kept building houses on top of each other and just keep adding on to this. So subsequently, this was a 1910 line that's there. Eddie says it's in good shape, but it does go up the property line between Mr. Gorsha and the person to the west, and goes up between his shed and the garage. There is no manhole up there to say exactly where it goes, but it does meander up through there and serve all those others. And again, we do consider that a private line because it was not installed by the city, it wasn't engineered by the city, and it's never been maintained by the city.
Okay. So you've had discussion with staff about this and investigating as what can't be done moving forward. We do not own the line. We don't know who owns the line, but we know that the city does not. Is that correct?
At this time, we're not claiming any ownership to that line, unless the council deems that they want to. But my only caution again would be that it's not just here. There's about 50, 60 houses probably in the Virginia Rainy Lake Addition that you could apply the same thing to, and then these also 2 houses or 3 houses further to the west.
Okay, so we did take some steps in which to try to correct the problem that you experienced, Mr. Gorsha. Our Public Works Director indicated that they did look at the line. It's clean. They made an adjustment to that lip to ensure the flow is not going to be impeded. And so far, you haven't had any issues with that since then. But your concern is that as it gets colder, it might freeze. Right? Please come to the podium, please. Bill, thank you.
So here we are. So if come this winter again, I guess I gotta get a camera, get the police department, and come ready to report and take a picture of when it froze and how he chiseled the thing. So if it freezes up again, it's so level right there, before you raise it up, when they flush the line, you can watch it not go down to the east, it goes up my line now, the water. So now you got a little bowl probably in there from raising that line. But if it freezes there, it comes back into my house, my property. To solve the problem, I should dig it up, I should be able to put a cap there, have the people have their problem, instead of running into my basement. This is like, for example, years ago when I had to convert off steam on my house. They ran a steam line, there's 2 houses behind me with 2 garages butted together. They ran a steam line underneath those garages to my house for steam. That steam line went bad. They knocked on my door, come to talk to the utilities and said, hey, there was no easement for that steam line to build on my steam line. We asked the lady behind me to run a steam line up to your house, and she said no. But we can run it down here up to your property line. From the property line to my house to reconnect steam, it's my cost. So here we are with this sewer line. All right, it's my cost, my problem, on my property now. Caused me a week's worth of cleanup and expenses. Since it's my line, at my property line, I should be able to cap the damn thing and say, you guys behind me, deal with your problem. Neighbor, same thing.
Okay.
I don't want to deal with coming back again with the cost, saying it's my problem, my thing, and have all this flooded basement again of sewer and everything else again. I shouldn't have to be put up with that because this manhole doesn't sit low enough to drain out and drop down and empty the manhole, my line.
Okay, I understand your issue. We did make some efforts to correct your claim that it may not be corrected and it's going to create some problems for you. I think we as our staff have to take a look at that to determine what our next step is to see what we can do to help you alleviate the concern that you have so you don't have to come back here, which we'll do. And so in the interim, I'll move on to the city councilors. They may have some questions for you or some comments to make. And could you stay for a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councilor Johnson.
Mayor. I appreciate your frustration with it's not the city's problem, but nobody is able to tell you that's your problem either. I have had that experience before when a pipe is running across a property that I have managed or owned. And that's a concern I have in general, that if there are several of these properties that were built with one subline going to individual residences, and we know that's an issue, why are we not addressing that? My frustration is that if we wait for problems to occur and people, I can anticipate this being a legal challenge. Well, as it said right here, that property, that pipe that goes between your house back to the other ones is not city property. Whose is it?
Private.
But what does that mean?
From the ordinance says, from the sewer connection at the main to the houses, it's private connection.
Yeah, I get that. But, so it's private, but is it Mr. Gorsha's? Is it house number 2? Is it house number 3? Which one of those private, because it was built when all that property was owned by a larger business?
Mr. Gorsha should retain legal services and talk about that, because like he says, if the property is on his line and he has ownership of that entire property, he can then tell these owners.
See, and I
But that's going to make them cause legal action against him as well. I mean, so they.
Yes.
Can I add a little comment?
It's a legal
Well, if you'll let me finish because if we know that this exists in multiple locations in the Rainy Lake addition, why are not we as a council and as a city being proactive in trying to alleviate these until they're emergency situations? Why can't we, and this is a question, and why can't we say, it doesn't make sense that there's 6 people that own this line. It does serve as a main feed. Why doesn't the city say, this is ours, and where you connect to that main, that's where your responsibility ends, just like we had to do with the property, the Northland Securities building, where their line went across and around and across. We know these problems exist in town, and we as a city don't talk about it until there's an issue, and then we have to sit and we have to have a meeting and we have to do this. And I'd like to see us start being proactive about some of these things, just like downtown when one of our constituents purchased a building, and then building next to her was purchased, and they turned on the water to one building, well, it was to both buildings, and the second building had flooding issues because back then you just shared everything. Those are the kinds of things I'd like to see us be proactive on instead of waiting for something.
It would normally be done during a street project. So when we talk about the 2021, 2023 street projects, this would be a great one to put as a priority, because that's usually when the sewers are addressed, and is also something we would assess for. So these owners would be charged for these connections to be run.
Yep. And I think that there's some responsibility on our part. We often, I'm waiting to see what happens. My electric's being done today, and I'm waiting to see what happens when I go from 8 fuses to who knows how many breakers in my house, what's connected where. So I really feel for you, Mr. Gorsha. I don't know that there's anything specific that we can do, but I think you need to look into what you can do, and if it's your property and that pipe you're drawing, the accuracy of that drawing is on, then, you're going to need to do it. But obviously you don't want to be a bad neighbor either. I would think that at some point there's some consideration for your neighbors. So this is very frustrating, and I hope we can start being proactive with the street projects and start looking at that back in the day, things weren't planned to be individualized and personal responsibility. Back then, things were community-driven and community-owned, and so there's a transition as we're moving forward. Thank you for coming in and bringing this problem to light.
Okay, Mr. Gorsha, could you please hold your comments for just a few more minutes, and we'll finish with the rest of the council so you can evaluate everything you might have, so for you to comment. The issue for us is that we can do a lot of things. We have to, as a council, make a decision. So when our engineering department talks about all these other places in town, it's been that way for decades. We may not even know until something happens, we discover it, and we try to do proactively, and I think the city has taken the responsibility to do as much as it can proactively to get this stuff done, okay? So when you don't know what's going on, there's not an issue, so how can we be proactive? We don't know what their issue is. In this particular case, you brought forth an issue. We were proactive. We tried to make an adjustment to ensure. We did an investigation. Everything looks good. So you're talking about the private line. We have to figure that out. If that's the case, we'll look at it from our end and see what we can do moving forward. So we have a couple more counselors that have some concerns or comments. We'll move to Counselor Paulson.
Mayor. I guess I have a question both for Public Works and Engineering. What is the proper way that line should run from a main to a private residence? What would be the proper engineering and proper laying of that groundwork?
Everybody has a private line going from their house. When Lake did their development, these were single lot, 25-foot lots.
So I guess where I'm coming from or where I'm going is moving forward with Street and Alley and as we move forward, you know, with Councilor Bearable as the chairperson of that committee, being mindful of how old and antiquated our systems are, and that we would similarly maybe consider a program similarly to what the public utilities did. So a homeowner then, if this work needs to be done and you each need your own private line, that there would be funding options available and working with the departments that would need to facilitate that. But I feel like where Councilor Johnson was going is that, you know, we need to be proactive moving forward. We have a lot of old lines here in our community, and I guess I would like to see maybe some kind of a planning process going forward with our Street and Alley Committee, especially with the new, you know, the steam conversions, the gas lines being installed. Now might be the most perfect time to kind of put a plan like that into play. And I apologize for the problems. It's no fun. I know I've been through that myself in the spring in our own home, and it's frustrating. So I hope we can get you some satisfaction, and I appreciate you coming here today.
Counselor Freely?
Yeah, Lee, I empathize with you because there were 2 times that our houses backed up too before they fixed whatever the problem was over by like Mill 40, I think it was, years back when they had to do that to create flow there. But I guess, Ed, maybe the line didn't freeze, but maybe where it was coming out froze enough to stop it up because of that ledge or that lip, but you feel corrective action has been accomplished to keep that flow steady then? Okay, and so that's the corrective action that you feel may alleviate that problem from recurring, but you don't know for a fact, you know? Yeah, and I mean, you're kind of holding your breath now as the temperature lowers as to whether or not it's going to do the same thing, but I guess the reality is there was some corrective action taken to try and alleviate that, but now we just have to wait and see, unfortunately. And then in the event that it happens again, there's going to have to be additional corrective action that may be much more major in some regard, whether it's on you or the city or a combination or whatever. And the other thing that I have a concern about that Steve kind of alludes to is that as we go away from steam throughout the neighborhoods, I mean, there's a lot of sewer lines that I've heard are reliant on the heat of the steam lines that are running down the alleys, and we're going to have potential disasters occurring as that starts to be shut off throughout the city. And we have to be proactive or at least be inventorying in some sort where that may potentially occur to multiple residents besides Lee. So just kind of, I mean, you're aware of that as well, I'm sure. So, yeah. I just hope for you that you don't have the same thing happen, but I guess I'm somewhat comfortable that some corrective action has taken place to keep that flowing. And now it's just kind of wait and see that it doesn't get so cold that it causes another problem for you this winter.
Counselor Baraboo?
Yeah, Lee, as chairperson of the Street and Alley Committee, and I've done that for many, many years, and then I went away from it for a number of years here, and I'm back as chair. One of the things that we've cautioned ourselves on are any of these private entity things where the homeowner owns from the city public roadways to the homes to be looking at replacing when things go wrong, because there are ordinances that require the homeowner to take care of those. I've got a suggestion for your problem. Every time now we do a new road project where we do total construction, we try to do individual connections, whether it be water, sewer, on the new entities when we actually repair these roads. That's part of the policy. But we have to coordinate with the public utilities also, because there's huge costs to doing this, and we don't have a huge budget because a lot of the money has dried up over the years. Money is starting to come back now, and we're going to put together a big program. But in the meantime, I have a suggestion. If Public Works, right now, throughout this winter months, and Ed, we could monitor that manhole and just check it how often do you do that now? Every week, okay. So they're going to monitor that over this winter months to see, and if they catch a problem, they can correct it right away. But we're going to have to figure out a way, and there is some new funding sources that hopefully the state legislature, because that's some of the big requests that are going to the state legislature. We just had a report from our legislative bodies, and infrastructure for small cities is going to be one of the biggest requests. They're all old. They're 70 years or older up in this end of Minnesota in the Iron Range. And we have a ton of these. We could not afford, as people have to pay taxes, to correct all the private things that are in the community unless we do it on a basis as we do the streets. And we incorporate those things, once we know about them, into a street project, so they become individual connections. But it's really, really costly. If you look at when we repaired a one-way street here, 2 blocks was like, what was it, Bill, $1.6 million? Just to do that, to put all new services and lines and stuff in there, so it's really, really expensive. But I understand your predicament. I've had an issue where I live out in Lency, because I'm in the old riverbed area, and I had a couple of backups, and I spent $7,000 of my own money to put an interior system in that goes to a sump pump. I put it underground down to my footings in the house, so all the water didn't do me any good to put a new drain tile because the water table's too high. So I did it inside the house and then pump it out. But that's just an example, and I had to spend my own money because it was my problem. And I feel for you, but we'll keep monitoring it this winter to try to make sure that that does not happen to you again throughout the winter months. Let's see what this fix does this winter, and then if we have to, we'll address it in the spring if something does happen again. Thank you.
Councilor Barnzelli.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Gorsha, I have all trust in the world on our engineering department and our public works guy. We haven't had a freeze up yet. When it happens, you'll have to come back and we'll have to deal with this. But when they say it won't freeze, I got to live with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're monitoring weekly, as our Public Works Director said. We'll keep apprised. It's one of our hot spots in the community. There are some, and this is one of our identified hot spots, and we're doing our due diligence to try to make sure that doesn't happen again, the correction that he made. We hope that you don't experience this issue. If so, then some action is going to have to be taken, but we're going to monitor it the best we can and try to alleviate this. The other portion of it, of you determining whether you want to cut it off and cap it off, that's a decision you'll make on your own. We just want to make sure that any city responsibility they have, we try to do our due diligence, do whatever we can to ensure that we've done what we have to do in order to try to help you alleviate your issue. So, Mr. Gorsha, please continue. Thank you.
Just a comment to Mr. Freely. Yeah, when you shut off the steam on some parts of the conversion things, I think that's what's the problem with my manhole. Because when they go out there and clean it, sometimes I go out there and look. A lot of steam, a lot of heat. I think it's from when they flush into the lake, the steam keeps the thing. But this past winter, a lot of ice, a lot of buildup and everything else. But what I'm I'm trying to be a good neighbor and everything else, but maybe the city can address having the city unblock that line instead of waiting Roto-Rooter 24 hours. Have them come do it, and all these other problem areas, have them run a line and try to unblock that line, instead of I have to wait all that time for Roto-Rooter. Where the city can take the responsibility, take it on thing, to run whatever doohickey up the line to unplug the line or unplug it, or whatever it is that's causing the problem right there, or at that manhole. Because they kind of monitor it, I think it's Friday and
On a weekly
Monday,
basis.
you know, but it happened that weekend, and I had to wait 8 to 10 hours before I got Roto-Rooter, you know. And if I could have had the city just do it, I could have saved 8 to 10 hours of backup.
Well, I think we can discuss that at the staff level. Britt?
Yeah, if you have a sewer emergency, call our sewer emergency line, and we can work on our main, but we
Well,
can't work on the private,
that's where I run into problem. They can't do that because it's.
private line, yep. And our insurance company
And
won't allow
that's
us
where,
to.
that's where I'm asking, maybe you guys can say, hey, you guys can run that line up and unplug it, so I don't have to let my basement flood, wait for Roto-Rooter to come along. I'm trying to work out something here to satisfy this problem, and hopefully this winter we won't have a problem or something else here.
I think, Mr. Gorsuch, we do recognize you have a very unique situation here, in that we were trying to do what we can to accommodate based upon what legally we can do. And so we'll try to do that on your behalf. We'll continue the conversation and keep in communication with you and figure it out what can be done. I think we've done, at least to this point, all we can do with respect to the policy and what we've done in the past. But there is some, like you say, we have a unique situation, and the councilors have indicated that they'd like to see us do a little bit more about alleviating the issue that you have. So we have to work at the staff level to ensure what we can do legally and what we can do as a community service, and what we can do to help alleviate the issue that you have, although we have taken some steps in which to do that already. So thank you, Mr. Gorsuch, for coming in.
That's all I'm just looking for, is just maybe the city can come clean it out, see if there's a problem right there, alleviate the problem so I don't have to sit around and wait.
Yeah, you know, and we'll have to talk about if that's feasible to do, and we will do that at our staff level and at our city council level too, so.
Well, will I hear back from that, or?
We'll stay in communication with you,
If you have
Britt,
an issue, call the emergency line.
and we'll come and take a look at it.
You know, it's a 24-hour emergency line. It does page the employees that are on call.
They just come out to the manhole, lift up the manhole, there's no problem, or what else can I do, you know, to stop the flow from all the people behind me?
Okay. All right, anybody else from the council have any comments they have to go? Anybody else? We'll stay in contact with you, Mr. Gorsuch. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call the sewer line. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you. And since we're jumping around today, we'll go back all the way up to item number 6. Approve the resolution approving contract for asbestos removal at 3 residential properties. We do have Bill Hennis here, but these are the 3 properties. These city owns these 3 properties. This is the former church. That's the old Clay Creations on 2nd Street South. It's the Widener former residential property, and then the house on 4th Street that we got from Veronica's estate.
Okay, thank you. So we own them? We have to do the asbestos removal on them before we can move forward with demo?
If we want to demolish them, we have to do asbestos removal on
So
them.
here we go. What is the council's pleasure? Councilor Johnson?
I will move that we approve the contracting with Act Incorporate to get rid of the asbestos and tear down those buildings.
Okay, moved by Councilor Johnson. Is there support?
I'll support that, Mayor.
Support by Councilor Bonzelli. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Freely?
Is this covered by grant funding through IRRB, or is this out of our pocket?
Bill?
would it be advisable to hold off to know whether or not we'll get that paper?
Regardless, we have to do the asbestos.
And Sherry, so we have a line item budget for these kinds of contingencies with regard to asbestos removal and demolition?
No, we do not have a line item for this.
And so this total on these 3 homes is in excess of 30,000, is it not, or no?
Mm-hmm.
31.7?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that, I mean, like, so it would be nice to get rid of these buildings, I mean, no doubt.
Yes,
I
we
mean,
get calls constantly about these buildings.
yeah, I know, but like, what would it hurt if they sit a little bit longer until we know
Be
whether
a
or
full
not we're
entire
gonna have
year.
the cost
It would be a full year they would sit,
A whole year?
a whole year.
Before the next funding?
Before the next, we only do demolitions in winter. So if we don't do this soon, we won't do it in the winter.
Well, we were just talking about how, you know, something else would have to be cut in order to afford $3,000 for the community gardens.
Right. Well, we do also.
What's gonna be impacted by the $31,000 if we're tearing down homes? I guess in my priorities set in my own mind, they're sitting there ugly as they are. And unless and until we know we've got assistance to take those down, what's the difference if they stand there ugly for another
Also
year
have a
or not?
vacant
I don't
building,
know. I mean,
vacant building registration ordinance going into effect January 1st. And we'll be having 3 vacant buildings. We have to register also because they're sitting there.
that's what I talked about. Even with that ordinance, what kinds of potential costs are we gonna incur by trying to enforce that ordinance? And then this is an indication of that right off the bat. It's 30 grand plus already.
This proposal was brought here a year ago, and we're bringing it back again. So now we're on
3 houses?
this 31,000, yes.
So regardless, it costs us to do this, whether we like it or not. Okay. It pains me to do that because there's other things that we could use this money for, such as assisting community projects and whatnot. But the truth is, I mean, we do have blighted properties, vacated properties that do need to be taken down, but I hate to take it right out of everybody's pockets to do that when there should be available funding for that. And you've heard my story on even, I still hear people talking about the steam issue in town. How could there not have been something afforded to ease the burden of residents having to transition from one heating system to another? Most and many of whom, literally, it's cost prohibitive for them to even do that, as indicated by a number of people who are already taking advantage of the 0% loan and can't pay it back already. So there's issues that we have to address, I agree. But I don't know if those issues are best addressed by moving forward with tearing down things that are just ugly to people's sight, when in fact it's costing us tens of thousands of dollars to do it. I don't know, I'm struggling with that, so just so you know. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But for me, it's about health and safety. We've made a commitment to tear these. They're not habitable buildings. They have to come down. We have to continue to work with the IEEE, get funding. They've been very supportive of that moving forward. We don't want this to become a fire hazard. We don't want it to become a homeless shelter for people. We've already got people moving into these places, having to kick them out. They have to come down. We have to take the steps to move forward with it. You know, we can't rely on every entity to give us funding, you know, free money. I mean, we try very hard to do so. We have a fiduciary responsibility moving forward. We made that decision several years ago to do that. I'm just as frustrated as you, Councilor Freely, that we you know, it costs money to do this. Asbestos abatement by a private party is a lot different than asbestos abatement by a city, government. And so, you know, they wouldn't incur some of these costs necessarily, but we have to because we own the properties. And we have a fiduciary responsibility and obligation to our community to keep health and safety at the forefront. So, you know, it's a quandary moving forward. So, Councilor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm attending to a child. Just a second.
Okay, you want to wait and we'll move to Councilor
Go right ahead. Yeah,
Beyondich first?
thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you.
Yes.
So when these buildings are taken down, is that property resold?
We sure can.
Are there any restrictions on who purchases that property?
Not at all.
So if this property that we are spending money on to take the asbestos out to take down, what if the former owner of that property turns around and buys it?
Prove the sale of it and how much we'd ask for it. I mean, I would assume we would ask our costs that we had in the demolition.
Some food for thought. Thank you.
We had that happen once already. And the sale price was what it cost us to tear it down. And that homeowner said, no, thank you. So that did come up. Good example, very good example. Thank you.
You know, and the property that Widener owns that's on Second, or by the lake there, we do have the three adjacent lots next door. So no, that is a very marketable lot if that building is torn down.
Counselor Paulson,
Handled.
Counselor Briones, have you finished? Okay, thank you. Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think for me, my concern is when we do these acquisitions, do we get an abatement assessment prior to this, like an estimation for that asbestos abatement?
No.
As those properties come forward? Would that be something that we should probably do to make sure that we in fact want to take the property, or that if it would qualify under the IRRB guidelines for some of that removal? Or, I mean, I guess I'm kind of in agreement with Councilor Freely, where you just hate to spend this money. And I do remember these being, you know, on our list. I know the Widener property is important. I know they're very important to have them demolished for safety reasons, especially two of them that I can think of off the top of my head of the condition that they're in. But going forward, I really feel like if we could get those estimations and maybe put a plan in place to mitigate some of these costs, so that we just have a plan for our demo plan program. Here's the steps you need to take. Here's does it have doing an asbestos inspection if it has asbestos. Here's the mechanism for mitigation, the financial means to, you know, so if we could put some sort of a program or a plan together, that might allow or assist us as a council to make decisions if we want to then in fact purchase those properties. So that would be my recommendation, and that's my concern now going forward.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson.
Just
Freely.
Just for the sake of continuing conversation, like, so we've torn down a number of buildings in town that are now empty available lots, and like Maya alluded, like, they can buy them back. Are we being successful in selling properties, at least like recouping some of our costs that we've incurred, or are they just sitting empty, beautified by green space, I guess, but
We don't have a lot that we owned or the city owned. I'm trying to think, Bill, what we've torn down recently that was owned by the city, not by the county or a private owner.
it would just ease my mind more
Yeah.
to know that there is some turnaround then where we're like recouping some of those costs by
Yeah, it
people
would be
then
the
having
in-
an interest in purchasing that property.
It would be
And
the
then-
intent of the RC Widener lot to recoup that. That's a viable housing location.
Right.
That we could get something for, and Bill's got his hand up back there too.
We're doing it all by ourselves. For example,
I guess, I know we have to take out the garbage, so to speak, but at what cost, I guess, is what I'm looking at. And that's what I worry about from Sherry's standpoint. I mean, and not that you can enumerate for me, like, that's $31,000 that's gonna be taken out of somewhere that potentially needs it more so than houses needing to be torn down. And I don't know what could you say generically what that's gonna impact potentially, or is it just like
Gary?
Out of that 31,000, it's my understanding, there should be a significant number of at least $6,000 to $8,000 from IRRB for one of them. So you're looking at more around 26 or 24,000. That would have to, and I hate to say contingency fund, or we do have an economic development line item just for the city administrator to do what we're doing with land purchases or cleaning and that. And we watch that closely. Sometimes it comes out a wash, but that's where I would take it from.
And one of these is the Widener property?
Yes,
on
yeah,
Bayview?
and the other one's
Okay, all right.
downtown here on that church
I'm
across
going
from
to move
US
forward
Bank.
on this then.
Tom?
Well, I just think that these are in prime locations in the city. I mean, there's a difference between tearing a house down between two other crappy houses in town and, you know, because nobody really knows other than the neighbors. But if you walk around the lake and look at Widener's building, I mean, people say, well, why is that there? We're getting a bunch of money to redo the path around the lake, yet we're looking at Widener's property. You know what I mean? And then the church is the same, and that building over here is right across the street from the school. I mean, you walk out the door and go, oh, it's terrible. I mean, location, I do think makes a difference, you know, in terms of you're gonna see these properties when you go around town and, you know, I mean, yeah, it's costly, but I think it is beneficial to get rid of them, especially the one on the lake. I mean, that's gotta go.
And if we don't move on this asbestos thing, when we go to item number 20, it's going to be a moot point anyway. Councilor Baraboo.
Yeah, if I remember Widener's property correctly, we had an option not to take that project. It went tax forfeit. But because of location, we decided to take that for, what was it, the $5 or $1 or whatever it was?
Cost of recording fees, and it wasn't much.
Yeah,
in
whatever it was,
asbestos.
it wasn't much money. But we looked at that because of the potential around that lake. So we've got those costs. And Sherry, I thought we put $100,000 in our budget toward economic development, and I consider that economic development if we take money out of that fund, because there's
That's
a
just
potential.
what I had
Pardon?
mentioned.
I didn't hear what you said.
I said, I believe that's what I had mentioned.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you then. Okay. I think we have to at least move forward with that particular property, because this schedule for next summer to do that lake stuff around the
Yeah,
lake.
that starts in May, the trail.
Yeah,
Like,
and
yep.
stuff on that, because that's an important thing we need to do for the city, so, and we've got all the money for it. Thank you.
Gary?
I agree with Councilor Friedli that going forward, though, we need to keep track of our costs. And if you do get a buyer interested, they should at least pay for what we put into it.
Well, most lots are 25-foot lots. Nobody's going to be able to build on a lot that's a 25-foot lot. But in the area of the Widener property, that's a buildable, on-the-lake type of environment. So if we don't move forward on the abatement, this is my perspective, this stuff is going to keep stacking up. Pretty soon you have 6 houses, then you have 10 houses, you have 20 houses. Where does it stop? You know, we're never going to catch up. The goal and the objective of this was to try to move forward and get some grant funding through the IRRB. They almost did not have their demolition program moving forward this last year. They decided to refund it. If it wasn't for that demolition program, abatement or whatever, we'd have a lot more homes that are, we have homes now that are in dire need of raising as well, but we can't keep up. And by delaying this any further, you know, funding is an issue, but we continue to move forward to helping requests with IRRB to do it. I think we have to do the abatement one way or the other. Whether we decide to tear the house down is another story. So the longer you wait, the more cost it's going to be. You know, that's the way I look at it. Anybody else have their light on? Councilor Paulson.
I do agree with you, Mayor. I mean, that's the most important thing is getting these down, and public safety is a concern for me as well. Are these slated then to be demolished, Bill, still yet this year, or is it just going to be the asbestos abatement?
Now we're just moving ahead. on our list to move forward, but this is something not gonna approve cleaning the building out.
This is a first step that you need us to take. Okay, thank you.
Keep the project moving ahead.
Thank you. Councilor Freely.
Is it advisable to have multiple ones all at one time, or should we do the one that's most prominent first and hold off on the others? Would that be more fiscally responsible? I don't know.
Well, don't we have to have at least 3 to present to the IRRB before approval, Britt?
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? So do we have a motion? We don't have one. We do have a motion, and do we have a support? Motion to approve and a support motion to continue with the costs associated with the asbestos removal on these properties. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye reluctantly. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 7 is the approved proposal for managed IT services for the City of Virginia. In your packet is a copy of the managed services agreement. I do want to point out that the table 1, equipment covered, is just an example. It's not our actual table. We're working on compiling that together actually right now. This proposal is with Pantheon Computers. If you remember, Sean was the one here at the last meeting. They're from Mankato, and they are the ones that are BCA certified and do work in the police department currently. They're offering their services at $4,750 a month for the city.
And what are we paying now, Britt?
Approximately 6
Thank you very much.
with all the antivirus and backup.
Thank you. I like the BCA certification, the presentation that they made at this last committee of the whole meeting that we had. In addition to that, we did have other bids come through. This is the BCA certified one. This is your recommendation by staff to move forward with this. Is that correct, Britt?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. Council?
Mr. Mayor, I will.
Councilor Bearable?
I will make a motion. It is Pantheon, right?
Pantheon.
I'll make a motion that we approve the managed services agreement with Pantheon for our IT services for, I don't remember the period of time. Is it a year, Brett? 1 year, with a review in 6 months.
Support for discussion.
A move by Councilor Baraboo to move forward with the approval of the IT services, supported by Councilor Freely for the discussion. Councilor Freely.
Just real quick, we've been with Computine in the past, who are a local entity, and so they're on site physically when they need to be within hours, I would imagine. I'm assuming most of this management is going to be online management, but will they avail, and can they avail somebody in a timely fashion physically in the event that something goes down here?
They do have a local rep here.
Okay, they do have a local rep here that they can call out? Okay, good. Thank you.
Councilor Paulson.
On the original contract under emergency services and response, it just says emergency service may be charged separately from this agreement, and that would include anything outside of 5:30 PM, Monday through Friday. When the gentleman that was here that came and made the presentation, I thought that we were under the impression that that would include, it would never get to the owner. There's 5 levels of basically employees as security. I'm not seeing anywhere in the contract where there's any extended portion of those emergency services, and then what would be the charge of the hourly charge of emergency services after 5:30? And then last question that I have is, how many times do we as a city utilize off hours between 5:30 and 8 a.m.?
I can get that information for you. Bring it to the council?
That'd be
That's okay.
great. And then is there did I miss it in the contract where there's an amount per hour for those emergency services? Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? So we have a motion moved and supported. There's some discussion with Councilor Paulson requesting some additional information, some clarification on the contract. So the question for me is, do we move forward pending an affirmative answer with respect to both these?
Why don't we just bring it to the meeting? We don't have to make a motion today, just bring it to the council
Okay, you'll
meeting
have the
next week.
information for the next council meeting?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 8 is review of proposals for auditing services for fiscal year 2019 to 2021. We received 2 proposals.
Councilor Johnson?
Mayor. Wendy stopped and asked, had some input on this, and Walker and Drew and Hani is a little bit more expensive, but they have done our audit for years, and there's a good working relationship. And her concern, which was very valid, was that the new company coming in may take longer. They may actually incur extra costs because of needing to do everything fresh. So I think that Walker, Drew, and Hani, they've done it for a while. Because my first thought was, well, let's have somebody else do it once just to make sure Walker, Drew, and Hani is on their stuff. But after speaking with Wendy at length, it's not feasible and it's not a good use of staff resources. So I would make a motion to utilize Walker, Drew, and Hani for professional auditing services based on the table presented.
Moved by Councilor Johnson. Is there support?
I will support, or go ahead, Gary.
I would support
Support by Councilor
if I-
Freely, and you want Sherry for information.
If Sherry
Commissioner
concurs,
Cummings,
do
Councilor
you
Freely.
concur, Sherry?
Yes, I've actually talked with Wendy and staff and Brett and familiarity.
So based on Councilor Freely's question, you're comfortable with Walker, Drew, and Hani as our auditor for the next fiscal year?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Anything else, Councilor Freely? Okay. It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is acknowledgement of the CPIU increase to the People Service Contract and authorized signature on the contract.
So what's the CPA increase?
It was 1.7%. So their contract will be increasing from $23,290 to $23,686.
Very good. Thank you.
I'll make the motion to approve the contract with People Services for the management services and operation of our sewage treatment plant.
Motion by Councilor Bearable. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 12 was the resolution regarding special assessments for violation of the Clearwater Discharge Ordinance. I did pull together a copy of the ordinance, and I did place a memo in there regarding the process we had went through. On my memo, it does state that we had been working on a Clearwater Discharge Program, or called Inflow and Infiltration, I&I, since 1995, according to an MPCA ruling at that time. Every property was required to have an inspection, even if the property did not have a sump pump, basement, or drain tile. And until a compliance card was issued from the city, the residents were considered in non-compliance. Those that are still in non-compliance are the ones that are being charged $650. And unfortunately, it kind of got messed up in your packet, but it's behind the utility information as a copy of the letters that went out in 2002 and 2003, stating that you have until December 31st, 2002 to get into compliance, or we're going to start charging you $600 with a $50 administrative fee. So we have been charging this fee to these people since 2003. The list has gone down greatly. When this first started, there was 19 letters that I sent these to. They've now gone down to, I believe there's 6 properties left.
Is this the questions you had, Mr. Nemi, about this particular part? Would you like to come in and address? Did you get your question answered? Very good, thank you. Counsel?
I have a question, Britt. We started this sump pump ordinance in what, 99? 95. You know, I've put in a system since then, but I don't have a certification certificate like you're supposed to have, because I've been at home. We need to really look at, see if everybody's gotten their certification certificates, because I think people, anybody's put them in after that time or
This was the
probably
last
never
6
got one.
parcels. We have the, engineering has them on record,
So, okay.
Including the exemptions.
including the
Oh,
exemptions.
okay. So if mine was done after the fact, maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago,
Because it didn't require you to have a sump pump, what it required is that you didn't have any clean water discharge into the sanitary sewer system. So we didn't want you
No,
putting in
yeah,
your
I
roof
didn't
tiles
have
or your
it.
drain tile into the sanitary sewer, just because to stop these backups that you see. It's to put it outside in a sump pump or just shoot your roof drains out into your yard or whatever it may be.
Yeah,
So
okay.
those are the corrections they were
So
working
then if I
on.
got a building permit, it's probably been certified then, which I did. 'Cause I had a
Exactly.
contractor do it. Okay.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
I just had a personal question on this.
Yeah, and all the contractors previous to this, to the MPCA ruling, it was very, very common to plumb your sump pump into your sanitary sewer, which caused the cities a lot of money that we're treating water that was essentially clean. It was groundwater that wasn't contaminated with soap or any other things.
Yeah, and I know we have a few exemptions to that because of the discharge where they have to discharge and it causes